fourth regular board meeting of October 14th, 2019. In closed session, the board gave direction to legal counsel. Please stand and join me for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. We have with us tonight two students. Nadaline Ruiz is a sixth grader from Tuolumne Elementary School, has received recognition for academics and character with High Academic Achiever and Eddie Awards. She is a member of the Anti-Bully Club and Student Council. Nadaline enjoys playing soccer and reading. She goes above and beyond to help others on campus and is always first to lend a helping hand. Nadaline would like to play soccer in college after graduating and become a teacher or veterinarian. Riley Bryant, sixth grader Riley, is a high academic achiever and member of the Anti-Bully Club also, student council and chorus. Outside of school, she enjoys playing sports and reading. Riley is a go-getter and always looking for ways to improve the school and help others. Following college, Riley wants to become a teacher or professional dancer. Students, please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and thank you for being here this evening. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, yeah. Stay up. Okay. We used to have it up here. Yeah, we used to have it up here.
We need to have the piece.
I'm coming. I want to call your attention to the fact that if you wish to address the board during the period for public comment on a subject not on the agenda, you must complete a public presentation request card and submit it to the board president prior to the period for public comment. Only those who have submitted cards will be called upon to speak, and no cards will be accepted after the period has begun. You will find cards in the lobby. Announcements. I would like to turn this over to the superintendent.
Thank you. And welcome tonight to the board meeting. It's great to see so many administrators out there. Usually there's students and parents, but it looks like, given that school was out today, that you guys were still working. So thank you guys for coming in. I want to just say two short things. One, today is the beginning of the week of the administrator, and I want to say personally thank you for all the work that you guys do each and every day. I know that your job is very demanding, and I'm not only proud of the work that you do, but I'm inspired by the dedication of all the principals in the school district. This is my fourth school district, and I have to say this is one of the hardest working, most passionate, dedicated group of principals that I've worked with, and I want to say thank you for everything that you do. Next. That was amazing. Next, I would like to say today was a really exciting day. School was closed. Students didn't come to school, but yet all of our administrators and many of our staff did come to school. I was out at 4 or 5 schools today, and I know that the cabinet was out in many others, and We saw some great work with respect to training for our teachers around collaboration, and many of our classified staff had training in welcoming schools and customer service, and what does that look like and what does that sound like, and how do we move that initiative forward. So today was a very exciting day to a large degree because of the work that you did in planning, so thank you for that work. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Brings us to item A10, approval of the consent agenda. I need to do a little bit of bookkeeping here. I'm pretty certain Ms. Newman's going to tell me.
I have a conflict to declare on item C6, and it falls under the exception to the Government Code Section 1091B. It's a family business.
Okay, so we'll vote on that separately. The other issue is item D8 is being moved off of consent up into discussion and action items under B7. So there'll be a B7A and a B7B. And I think that takes care of my bookkeeping. There's E. B7B, C6, B7. And then F5 as an approval to revision to the student member selection. That's on the regular agenda. I have to come back to that. Correct, but that's on the regular discussion. I'm on consent. So I believe we're good on consent, right? Am I missing something, Trustee Brown?
We can vote on the consent agenda and then go back to A8 and A9. Skipped over those.
Roger, the new thing we've done. See, don't change the rules. Okay, so let's do a consent and then we'll go back to board meetings attended. Trustee Newman, you want to step out and we'll do everything, we'll do C6 first. Any questions or comments on C6 by board members? Public? Back to the board, we're looking for a motion to approve item C6, so moved by Trustee Brown. Looking for a second? Trustee Marks, all those in favor say aye. Aye, passes 6-0 unanimously. Okay, that gets us back to the rest of consent. Any questions or comments from board members on the remaining consent agenda? Seeing none, out to the public. Seeing none, back to the board, looking for a motion to approve consent agenda minus items C8, C6, and D8. So moved by Trustee Marks, seconded by Trustee West. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Passes unanimously. Now we're back to the thing that I asked to change and I forget about it, which was reporting what we've done. Don't change the rules. So I see a light by Trustee Brown.
So we're reporting on meetings that we've attended. Want to report on the fall trustees dinner that Dr. Noguchi and I attended and represented the district. I would like to let the rest of the board members know that there are no longer 2 trustee dinners during the year. So fall will be our only chance to do that. So keep that in mind as the fall dinner comes around again. We did have some excellent speakers from MJC talking to us that night about collaboration with the districts and some great things that are happening for our students and opportunities that we'll be pursuing to make sure that more of our kids are prepared and ready to do well in college starting at MJC. And then also I just want to report that this is telling you ahead of time, but I will be speaking tomorrow at a symposium for student board members and look forward to representing the district there.
Thank you, Trustee Brown. I'm going to work from my left. Trustee West.
I attended the IB pinning ceremony at Gallo Center. I'd never attended that before, and it was very well done, and the families and the students were so excited, and the kids were all dressed up, and I think my favorite part was watching the parents pin their children and seeing the family dynamics and the interaction and how proud the parents were of the students, and so it was a great ceremony.
Trustee West. Irvin. Irvin, she went, you're next.
Yes, I attended the youth town hall meeting hosted by Congressman Josh Harder, and probably 90% of the youth in that youth town hall meeting were from our high schools. I ran into a number of Bayer, Enox, I think there was Johansson. It was standing room only, and many of our students asked some really poignant and relevant questions of our congressman. And so I was very, very proud to be see them interact on a political level like that, even though that many of them were not of age to vote yet. But yet they felt their voice was critical to the future. And it was nice to see how receptive and responsive Congressman Josh Harder was to their questions and their concerns about our future. So that was really, really great to see our students come out and show up. It was the same night as the pinning ceremony, so I had to make a choice. So I know we had some going to the pinning ceremony, so I wanted to be there.
Trustee Marks.
I have two things to report on. Attended the CalSSD, the California Large Suburban Districts meeting with Associate Superintendents Herbst and Zerly, and it was a very informative meeting. I just have to tell you that this year, 1,300 bills made it to the governor's desk. He has signed 969 plus some that he signed today. He vetoed 31, and there's 341 still waiting. Or I guess that's where we determined he finished them last night. I don't know exactly how many, but as of Friday, that's where they were. So my understanding is these were some that we were concerned about with the CalSSD and school districts, but SB 328 was the late school start time. He signed that. So that will go into effect in 2022. And then AB 218 was signed. It extends the statute of limitations on civil claims of child sexual abuse and increases the damages. AB 500 was vetoed. That was the paid maternity leave. AB 751 was vetoed. That was the option to administer SAT or ACT instead of the SBAC. I know somebody up here will be disappointed in that. And AB 197 was also vetoed, and that was the full-day kindergarten that would have required at least one full-day kindergarten class at each school site, which would have been really difficult for some school districts to be able to implement that. And then one other thing, he also signed into law the AB 48, the school bond, that will be a and you probably saw that in the newspaper, but that will be $15 billion. I asked a question to see if we could get some of that funding, and actually with our bond, we should be able to get some matching funds for our local, that will match with our local funding, and it'll be between 50 and 55% of our local funding that will that they will help reimburse us for. So that's helpful. It'll make our bond go further. So I'm excited to see how that will actually play out in the new dynamics that are happening in Sacramento. So that was some information that we learned on Friday. Also, I have attended the Parents Leading Change. It's formerly instituted by the Dr. Parker Group. And so he had this vision, and so the new leadership has changed it to Parents Leading Change. And we met at Franklin School, went to their Healthy Start program, and shared with the parents there about the opportunities for them to work with the school district and how to help their students and mentoring their students and different options that we might have. Then we also had a parents' night this last week, and we had parents that came. I'm excited to see how we move forward, but these are our new brochures. We have them in Spanish. I had a few to pass out, so we have some in Spanish, and let me see, I'll pass out 4 this way, and some in English, mostly in English, but these are to help our students. And can I have one just to read the bottom of it? Sorry. And our mission is to building bridges through collaboration with parents, schools, and community to increase the graduation rate from kindergarten to high school for underrepresented scholars. So we had parents and students that attended Mark Twain in the cafeteria, and so we'd like to continue on with that and have more opportunities for our staff and parents to collaborate and see how we can work together to work with the students in our community. So it's going in a great direction, and I'm excited to be part of the group and where we're headed.
Thank you, Trustee Marks. Trustee Newman.
Yes, along with Dr. Noguchi, I had the opportunity to attend the SPY luncheon last week to honor the amazing businesses in our community that are supporting our school sites and our students. Saw many of our administrators there as well. It's a great partnerships that we have formed with many businesses, many leaders in our community, and we live in a generous town. And then I also attended the pinning and got to pin my son, which is really fun. So that's a nice ceremony.
I attended 2 events. I was at Sonoma for the spelling bee, which I thought was fantastic. There were representatives from all 22 elementary schools. I would argue, and I don't know that I did the head count, but it was almost every principal as well. Marla, many members of staff. It was just a great afternoon. Parents, all in the back of the room with me. Sonoma is a very interesting school to go to because it's very open. And so while the spelling bee is going on, I can hear classes going on behind me. But it was a great ceremony. The kids had a great time. The parents had a great time. I was glad to be able to go out and attend and watch that. The second event I did was the Modesto Invitational Marching Band Tournament. That was by far an amazing success. Arnav isn't here tonight. He was there briefly. I was stuck in the ticket booth for 7 hours. I saw very little, but I sold 1,300 tickets. 1,600 individuals performed from about 15 different marching bands from all over the state. And the parents, the teachers, the boosters, an amazing job. Last year was the first year we'd done it again. This was supposed to be the 40th year. Clearly there was a break in between. But I think what the boosters and the parents and the music director at Enox did was up the bar. And it was much more better handled this year with tables, concessions, with children, with performances. And it highlighted Johansson as a great site to have activities at. And I think that's the other thing that I took away from it is we look at our different high school sites where we have the ability to bring the community in and do events at places like Grigori, Enox. Johansson is unique because of the parking lot and the size, but it was a great event all the way around. Those were it's been vetoed. It's the second year it's been vetoed. Never doubt the special interest money to swing a vote or a signature. With that said, that takes us to back into the agenda, approval of the order of discussion action items A11.
A9.
We're back to A. We're back up. We did, okay, see, we've reorganized this thing. Does we like to recognize administrators and proclaiming Order 13 for the week of school administrators? Who's handling? Mr. Godot, take over.
Good evening, President Walker, board members, Dr. Noguchi, and cabinet. It is my great honor this evening to speak to recognizing our school administrators. As Dr. Noguchi pointed out earlier, this is the week of the school administrator. It's kind of a broad term that is represented by the sample of site admin we have, but also does include from the superintendent down all of our educational leaders in the district. And so we want to take this moment to recognize the dedication and the hard work, I think Dr. Noguchi eloquently put it, that inspire us on a daily basis. I think the work has changed. I know that work of the site administrator has changed over the years. And these folks do a great deal amount of time, not just during the day, but the nights, the weekends, the summers. And we are every day more and more responsible for every aspect of the students that come onto our campuses. And these folks do a great job of supporting our students and our communities and the work that they do. And we just want to take a moment to recognize that and celebrate that. And in doing so, I'd also like to ask David Sanchez, principal at Roosevelt, to come up. He is here on behalf of MCS Managers President Nate Shar, and I think he'd like to say a few words. But before we do that, I just want to say thank you on behalf of Cabinet and the board for all of the work and dedication that our school administrators do day in and day out.
First of all, I think Nate Shar was very excited to hand this responsibility off to me, and he owes me breakfast for sure. But no, I'm super just thankful for the board, Board President Walker, trustees, Superintendent Noguchi, cabinets. We're so thankful for the support you give us each and every day. We do have difficult jobs. You know, we have really tough jobs, but so does everybody in education. But we're just so blessed that we have such a great group of people to work with. I'm so honored to be a part of this group of administrators over here. They're so amazing each and every day. So I'm just going to ask that you stand up and that, can we give them one more big round of applause, please? Thank you so much for recognizing us, and have a good night.
Go ahead and take the rest of the night off, guys. Good job. Except for you, Ryan.
Okay, so now I think this gets me back on script again. The difference between the computer and the printout are different. A11, approval of order of discussion and action items. We have a couple of changes here. I mentioned when we got to consent, we've moved item D8 to B7B. Item B5, we're tabling. That was the proposed revisions to the board bylaws 91-111 and 91-50 for our student board member. Arnoff had another commitment tonight, and so he's not here, and he did a lot of work on this with Trustee Brown. And I don't want to move forward with that until both of them are here and they can sort of go through all the work they put into that. So with that being said, are there any other questions or comments from board members on the order of action or agenda items? Seeing none, out to the public. Seeing no comment, back to the board, looking for a motion to approve the order of action discussion items. Moved by Trustee Newman, looking for a second. Trustee Irvin, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Passes unanimously. Brings us to the period for public comment. Members of the public may address the Board of Education on members not on the agenda. Complaints against specific employees should be I'm reading the wrong script. Thank you for attending tonight's meeting. Your attendance shows your interest in our schools, and for that we thank you. The period for public comment is limited to 30 minutes. Time will be allotted to individuals based on the number of request cards submitted. The maximum for any one speaker is 3 minutes. I would also like to remind you that if you wish to make a complaint against a specific district employee, you should follow the district's personnel complaint procedure. Copies of that procedure are also available in the lobby, as are agenda copies, which outline the procedures we'll observe during the period for public comment. The right to address the board does not exempt the speaker from any potential liability for defamation. Before I ask tonight's speakers to address the board, I want to clarify that we may not engage in any discussion on the topics that will be raised because we are legally obligated to provide the public with advance notice about topics that will be discussed. Agendas are intended to inform the public about all topics of discussion and action, so anyone interested in a particular subject on the agenda may attend the meeting and address the board. While we cannot engage in discussions on the items not on the agenda, I assure you that we will listen attentively to your comments. Again, thank you for joining us tonight. I have only one card, and so Mr. Joel Campos, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, board. This is my first time being here, so I'm really excited, but I have a short time. So I just want to say my name is Joel Campos. I live on 3rd and I Street. I went to Martone, Roosevelt, Prescott, and I know it's not in your school district, but and I graduated Downey High School. So the reason why I'm here, I'm talking about Modesto Max and providing transportation to students. There are many benefits for the public transit agency to provide when they provide transport for students. And so I just listed this. Students would be able to ride the city bus for free if you guys made an agreement with Modesto Max, like MJC did in the Yosemite Community College District. They would be able to ride 7 days a week, and city buses are ADA compliant. All the student would have to do is just show their ID card. I'm talking about high school students, and then maybe initially, and then maybe that could grow to all K through 12. What does this do? It reduces the burden on the school district to provide drivers and reduces maintenance costs, liability, and or risk in terms of like collisions and just risks that come with those type of assets. As for safety for the students riding public transit, Modesto City Schools could have an agreement with City Modesto and provide officers at the bus station. And honestly, I went to Downey High School. I rode the bus to school after track practice, cross country, and then I even rode it from my house to the Vintage Fair Mall to work at Charlie's Grilled Sub. So as a high school student, I rode the bus. I even rode at MJC. I rode the bus going to CSU Stanislaus, and when I went to San Jose State for my master's program. As far as other benefits, there's benefits to air quality and traffic. The city buses already travel on the routes the school buses take. Taking those buses off the road reduces VMT. What is that? It's vehicle miles traveled. It's where the state's going as far as like congestion management. It's vehicle miles traveled, getting cars to drive less, or buses in this case. What does it also do? It also reduces traffic. After 2 o'clock, our streets are clogged. You know that, and getting those big buses off the roads would help with that. It also reduces emissions. Cities are required to go 100% renewable energy on their bus systems by 2040. Also, this would provide increased ridership for the Modesto Max. Modesto Max, Star, and Series, those bus agencies, they can't even come together because they're barely making fare box recovery revenue. But if you throw all these students on the buses, that'll increase their fare box revenue and allow for some flexibility, allow for joining together, becoming one larger bus agency, which will provide more transportation options for everyone. Other cities are doing this, and school districts like City of Stockton, Tracy Unified School District, Lodi Unified School District, and Sacramento Regional Transit District are all moving in this direction. It's going to help air quality, traffic, and students do it already anyways. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing with us tonight, Mr. Campos. Send that back your way. Okay, that brings us to item B1, which is our student board report. Our student is not here tonight, although he got his award, and then he went off to do his other events that he had going on. That takes us to item B2, which is our report on academic achievement and LCAP indicators, which is surely Mr. Reynolds. Welcome, sir.
Good evening, Board President Walker, members of the Board of Education, Superintendent Noguchi, Cabinet. In case anyone missed it, my name is Ryan Reynolds, Director of Assessment Evaluation, and I'm here this evening to provide a report on the 2018-19 end-of-year student performance data. I'll be providing an overview of the MCS Data dashboards with specific emphasis on smarter balanced assessment results. I'll also share information about our progress on the LCAP local indicators tonight. I will be sharing the spotlight this evening with Associate Superintendent Lauren Odell, who will share some insights as well as next steps relative to each district's specific results. Thank you. To give you an overall preview of how the presentation is set up, I'll begin by reviewing the MCS Data dashboard, which reflects end-of-year data points from the 2018-19 school year. I'll then move on to our local indicators, followed by our 2019 CASP or SBAC data. This report this evening is aligned with District Goals 1 and 3. And the purpose of these next few slides is to share the updated MCS data posters with you. I'd like to thank Krista Noonan, the Chief Communications Officer, for her time spent updating our data dashboard posters this year. For the sake of time, I'd like to note that this will be a broad overview of several academic infographics displayed on the MCS data dashboards. Though I will not be addressing the enrollment, attendance, or discipline data, as these data points have been or will be addressed during upcoming board presentations in more detail. So we begin with the elementary district's MCS data dashboard. The data displayed here reflects student progress for all grades from kindergarten through junior high. There's also a handy-dandy printed copy for those of you who wanted to look at it there. Our third grade students are reading, I'm going to start on the top right, by the way, for your convenience. So join me on our journey. Our third grade students are reading more words correct per minute, showing strides in reading fluency as the percent of students who met end-of-year targets increased by 4% since 2017. Second and sixth grade math fluency declined in the last year, more notably at the sixth grade level. We saw an improvement in fourth grade writing proficiency over the prior year, with a 1-year 3% increase. Writing proficiency has also seen a small increase as fourth grade students who met targets in at least 2 of 3 writing assessments increased by 1% over 2 years. Likewise, we saw a 2% increase in sixth grade typing proficiency, but it should be mentioned that we increased the required words per minute this year to 35 words per minute. When we look at our English learners who've been in the United States for more than 5 years, 28% of them reclassified as fluent in English last year. I should note that California fully transitioned from the CELT test in the prior year to a new assessment for English learners last year called the LPAC. This makes it difficult to compare these results to prior years, different tests. Kindergarten students showed a 7% increase in early literacy skills on the end-of-year 2019 DIBELS assessment. First grade remained steady. Eighth grade students passing all of their core courses in junior high remained steady at 82%. All right, now we're going to flip it over to the other side. And just to mix things up, we're going to start on the left and go the other way. Top left. In the high school district, I'll move counterclockwise. The graduation rates remained largely the same, growing from approximately 87% in 2018 to 87.1% in 2019. County and state rates have not been reported at this time. Compared to the elementary district, we saw a similar percentage of ELs reclassify as fluent English speakers, 27% in this case. The dropout rate decreased from 7.7% in 2018 to 6.6% in 2019. The reporting timelines have been shortened so that this outcome data can be included on the California School Accountability Dashboard in December. Historically, you may recall the data usually lagged by 1 year. This shortened reporting timeline is the reason we're able to share preliminary 2019 MCS rates with you, though state and county information is still unavailable. Of the 3,177 students who graduated in 2019, 43% completed the A to G required coursework to meet college entrance requirements. This is a 1% decrease from 2018, but still a 2% increase over 2017. 77% of the 3,694 freshmen in Modesto finished the school year on track to graduate, with 55 units completed. This went down a bit from the 78% prior. The percent of students participating in career technical education, or CTE courses, is 46%. Completing CTE pathways is a factor in the college career readiness indicator that will be displayed on the 2019 California School Accountability Dashboard, along with participation in the Advanced Placement Program. 2,675 of our sophomores participated in the PSAT 10 last year, as it was tied to one of our LCAP goals. We saw increases in the percent proficient at all levels. 60% of students met standards for English reading and writing, and 29% met standards for math. 28% of our students met standards in both English and math, compared to 34% across the state. The number of unique students taking AP courses fluctuated each year to 2,476 students in 2018-19. This mirrors the similar decrease in the number of total AP courses taken. The overall pass rate on the AP exams last year for Modesto City School students was 55%. That's a 3% increase over 2 years. When we look at student performance on International Baccalaureate, or IB exams, we see that students who earn a full IB diploma have a pass rate of 63%. This is a decrease over 2 years. However, in the past 2 years, we did see more students took exams. The number of full diplomas increased to 71 over 53 the year prior, while still not reaching the number earned in 2017. I'd now like to take a moment to share with you our progress on the LCAP local indicators for 2018-19. In California, for local control funding formula priorities, where data is not collected at the state level, a district will measure or report its progress through the California dashboard based on locally collected data. Progress on these local indicators must be reported annually to the governing school board. All local indicators reflecting progress in the 2018-19 school year are met and have been reported on the California dashboard for the elementary and high school district prior to the November 1st, 2019 deadline. I'd like to note on that as well that there was another attachment to this agenda item that has the full detail on everything you could possibly want to know about local indicators. So, for the remainder of my presentation, I'll focus on the Smarter Balanced Assessment results. We'll start with a balcony view of all grade levels and then focus on each separate district, elementary and high school. This assessment, often referred to as the SBAC, is administered in the spring to all students in grades 3 through 8 and 11. Students completed assessments in English Language Arts, ELA, mathematics, and science. The science assessment administered in 2019, also known as the CAST, was in its first operational year and results have not been provided yet. It is important for you to know that there are 4 possible student achievement levels: standards not met, standards nearly met, standards met, and standards exceeded. You will at times also hear these achievement levels referred to as levels 1, 2, 3, and 4. It is always our goal to see students meet or exceed standards. Modesto City Schools is home to 22 elementary schools, 4 junior high schools, and 8 high schools. We're encouraged by those schools that increase their percentage of students who met or exceeded standards. With the exception of English Language Arts at the elementary level, both districts saw increases this year. The state similarly saw moderate increases this year, whereas the county had a 1% decrease in ELA. On this slide, state and county data include all grades 3 through 12. On this chart from left to right, the black bar is California, purple, the Stanislaus County, and dark blue is the Modesto City Elementary District, followed by the high school district. And finally, the combined MCS districts is on the right. When we look at the state and county results, which encompass all grade levels, both elementary and high school, we see that the state performs higher than Stanislaus County in both ELA and math. Both county and state performed higher than Modesto City Schools. It appears that the high school district outperformed the state in language arts, but when you combine both districts in a similar K-12 comparison, as seen on the right side, the state was still notably higher. Here I provided a list of schools with the most notable increases in the percent of students meeting or exceeding standards in English Language Arts. Schools such as Enox, who improved by 14%, and Johansen, 13%, led the district in single year-over-year change along with Elliott, Beard, and Insulin. However, it's important to note fluctuations in multi-year comparisons. This is why we provide you with 3 years of data here. Both Enox and Johansen recovered ground lost the year prior, though other schools continue to show growth each and every year, such as El Vista, Sonoma, Marshall, and Franklin, to name a few. Likewise, this table displays the school sites with the highest growth in mathematics. We see Robertson Road Elementary with tremendous growth, along with Enox and Johansen making up ground again. Beard and Everett also had some encouraging gains. Another way of looking at CASP data is individual student growth. What do we see when we compare each individual student's score this year to that same individual student's score last year? How does their year-over-year growth compare to similar students across a cohort of millions of students? In this visual, we see a two-way comparison between overall performance, which is top to bottom, and the amount of growth each individual student made over the year prior, shown left to right. Looking at data in this way, with each dot representing an MCS school, a school in the upper right corner would have seen tremendous individual student growth, and their students would have performed at the highest levels. In contrast, schools on the bottom left would have seen a lower overall performance, and the individual students would have improved by a smaller margin compared to their scores the prior year. Schools in the center of the chart showed average performance and student growth. When we look at the spread of our elementary and junior high schools in English language arts, we see that there's room for improvement when it comes to growing individual students year over year in their performance, with only 15 of 26 schools showing average or high growth for students. In mathematics, only 13 schools had average or high growth and generally performed below the bar for meeting standards. This is the same data in list form sorted by schools with the highest growth percentile. It's a 2-year comparison of English language arts student growth. Beard, Robertson Road, Kirshen, Marshall, Elvista, Everett, and Shackelford all showed improved individual student performance year over year to a greater degree than similar students at other schools. Similarly, in mathematics, Robertson Road, Beard, Kirshen, Everett, and Sonoma had moved the needle to a greater degree than other schools and similar students. This bar graph compares each grade level in English language arts. Bars in the graph represent the percentage of students achieving the goal of meeting or exceeding standards. All grades, on average, performed around the 30% mark, with the exception of high school, which performed above 51%. We must consider that each percentage here is an average of all students at all schools. When you consider this data at the school level, you'll see a range of performance at each grade level that falls below and above each average, depending on the school. Here we see the same table for mathematics. In all grades except for grade 3 throughout the district, less than a quarter of students met the assessment target. Now, as we narrow our focus to the elementary district, we see that they maintained the percent of students meeting or exceeding standards in language arts and slightly increased the percent of students who met or exceeded standards in mathematics. Our goal is not only to increase the number of students who met or exceeded standards, but also move our lowest performing students from level 1, standards not met, into levels 2, 3, and 4, exceed standards. So as you move from left to right, you want to see those lines get larger at the top. This stack chart illustrates the movement of students over 4 years in English and math. In past years, you can see a steady increase in the size of the bands at the top. Levels 3 and 4 met and exceeds. You can also see, by contrast, a steady decrease in the number of students at levels 1 and 2, not met and nearly met. This year, for our elementary K-8 district, language arts remained flat and math saw slight improvement. This cohort view allows you to track the same group of students' performance over 2 years in English language arts. You can see a group of 4th grade students increase their performance in 5th grade. In grades 4, 5, and 6, we see students maintain or improve compared to the year prior, while grades 7 and 8 students decreased over the year prior. In mathematics, students in grades 6 and 7 last year improved their performance as they transitioned from one grade to the next, while students in grades 4, 5, and 8 saw decreases in their performance. As we look at the performance of student groups in language arts over 3 years, we generally see a trend of similar performance. Smaller student groups tend to see larger fluctuations year over year as the population size impacts the percentages. For instance, SED, or socioeconomically disadvantaged students, represent nearly 88% of the students tested, whereas the Filipino student group only represents 34% of the students tested. 34 of the students tested. Small changes in just a few students' performance can affect the overall percentages for such small groups. However, we still see performance gaps between notable student groups. Students with disabilities, SED, English learners, African American and Hispanic students met and exceeded standards at lower rates than white and Asian students. In math, elementary and junior high student groups generally showed incremental growth. However, students with disabilities and students who report 2 or more ethnicities showed a decrease. We see the same achievement gaps noted in language arts. In the high school district, juniors are the only students who participate in the language arts and math smarter balanced assessments. We saw a 1% increase in the percent of students meeting or exceeding standards in English and math, especially at Johansen High School. We saw a 1-year increase. At grade 11, where in past years we see a steady decrease at levels 3 and 4, these bands at the top, we see the trend reverse this year, and instead we see increases in the percent of students moving into levels 3 and 4. Mirroring the overall trend, student groups overall also showed an increase in the percent of students meeting or exceeding standards last year in English language arts. The achievement gaps between student groups remain. Some groups, again, were too small to report data, such as the American Indian population, which had fewer than 10 students test this last year. In mathematics, grade 11 student group performance mirrors the 1-year change in English, as well as the achievement gaps between groups, though the rates meeting and exceeding standards in math for all groups are generally lower than English. Joining us now to talk about next steps in our plan moving forward is Associate Superintendent of Curriculum Instruction and Professional Development, Lauren Odell.
Thank you, Ryan. So we're looking at multiple areas to continue to keep our movement going forward and actually excel, make that a more rapid movement. So some of the things we're doing is, obviously, as you're well aware, the professional development, the very targeted, focused professional development, our collaboration with our 26 days this year, and that was our focus today for our district-wide PD. We have various assessment committees going on. So we have a math study committee going on with the math assessments, looking at IABs, the interim assessments from SBAC, as well as the SWAN assessments. And we have an ELA assessment committee, K6 and 712, looking at what are the most appropriate assessments to be looking at the standards and the grade rigor that our students need. We are in the middle of an English learner program review. You could see that English learner data, and we know that we need a lot of work in that area. We also have a technology evaluation going on with Russ and what that looks like in the classroom. Not necessarily our server per se, but the technology that the teachers have in their hands and what the students have daily. And we have our principal coaching working on our feedback, what feedback looks like to the principal, and we're starting to move to what the feedback will look like for the teachers in the classroom. So feedback for all of us and what that differentiation is. What do we need for the different student populations that you've seen? Ryan, do you have the clicky? Thank you. So that was at the district level. We also have, as you're familiar with, our college and career indicator. This is a critical piece that tells our community how we're doing. Just recently, they added the state seal of biliteracy to the college career indicator. So we're looking at different ways that we support our students. It's all affecting this college and career indicator, the advanced placement numbers that you saw, international baccalaureate, dual enrollment. Of course, that state seal of biliteracy never was included in that, and now it is, and our CTE, career technical education pathways. Those are all part of that CCI, that college and career indicator. We also are looking through our interventions and ensuring that they're the best that we can put forward, such as what does summer school look like? What could it look like for our students? And we have increased our MTSS programs, the sites that offer an intensive MTSS structure, and we've increased our after-school programs. So we look through what we're providing at the district level, what we're focused in for the college and career indicator, and how all those different populations and programs now affect that measurement, as well as the different interventions. That really leads us to our questions now, and I'm going to open it back up for either myself or Ryan. Thank you.
I want to thank everybody here. Mr. Reynolds, I think I said this last year, that it's a significant improvement upon the reporting data we've gotten. And for those of you who don't know, the mountain of data that they're going through to get this to report to us, it's huge. And I think one of the things we did differently this year certainly was the two of us swapping data back and forth and thoughts. I certainly heard some of that in the presentation tonight with the slides I sent out this morning, and I think that's helpful. The work that goes into this, if you don't realize it, is extraordinary. Just on the testing realm, without talking about the AP and the fluencies, and it's Mount Everest for those that don't realize. And I wish the room was fuller so that there were more people that could appreciate all the work that goes into this, because it's a heavy lift. With that, we're going to open it up for questions. I see Mr. Irvin has a light. Trustee Irvin.
Yes, a great report. I just wanted to know of the sophomores and the PSAT, that 2675 number. What percentage of the sophomores does that represent? Do you know? In our district, what percentage of that number?
I don't, but I can get you that information. I'd have to do some quick math. I could probably do it before the end of the night.
Oh, okay. And is it open to all sophomores? Is that presented to all
Yeah, so
sophomores?
it's, and others can speak to this as well, but it's encouraged. So students don't have to pay to participate in the PSAT 10. That's part of the LCAP funds, and so getting kids college ready. And it's completely paid for, and the goal is to get every sophomore to participate, but they do have the option to opt out if they don't want.
Because it's coming up soon, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. So the PSAT happens in the fall, and the PSAT 10, which is what we have our sophomores take as part of this LCAP piece, that's in the spring. So that'll be more in the March area.
So just to jump in, last year, sophomores, we had 3,742 sophomores.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
And then yes, because my daughter was a sophomore last year, and she spent a great deal of time convincing me to take it for the reason of taking it versus getting out of class. So there was this great debate at home. Are you right? Because it was, but yes, she took it and she did well, and so it was free and it was opened up to her, so it was everybody.
Well, mine's a sophomore this year, so I didn't see any paperwork or anything. So.
So Trustee Newman, I believe your light was up next.
I lost my question. Oh, darn.
I can come back to you after Chad.
Yeah, go to
Trustee
Chad.
Brown.
So on the dashboard for K-8, in typing proficiency, it looked like we had a spike in 2018 and dropped again in 2019. Did something change in what we're presenting?
Yeah, so just beneath that, you'll note that it says in 2019, the words per minute criteria changed.
Okay.
So that bar of success went from 25 words per minute to 35.
Got
So
it.
there was a significant increase in the words per minute. That
All right.
All right, you're back, Trustee Newman.
Sorry about that. And thank you for your work on this. This was a lot of material, and I poured through it. I appreciate it. So on the AP, just trying to understand this number and the 55% pass rate. So what percentage of our students are taking AP tests? So, because I know, okay, so 2,476 tests were taken, and of those tests, 55% passed. But of those students taking that test, those likely AP students, they're probably taking 4 of them at least, right? Mm-hmm. Usually an AP kid is an AP kid. So what I'm trying to get at is how many of our students are in that? How many students does that represent?
So
An unduplicated number does say right there. For the
Okay.
count.
So
the only thing that's different about what you're asking is you're asking for an unduplicated percent. So what percent of all of our students unduplicated took an AP test? Is that what you're asking?
well, so that I'm misunderstanding the number. So it's not 2,476 tests taken, it's 2,476 students taking AP tests.
Yes.
Okay. That clarified that. So of those students taking it, they have a 55%, of those 2,400 students approximately taking it, they have a 55% pass rate. And we have a very high pass rate in Spanish on our Spanish test, as we do in IB as well. They have a very high pass rate on that. Okay, I just wanted to understand that number better. Okay, thank you.
Trustee Lopez.
Yeah, I have a question in regards to the growth between mathematics similar student growth. I think it's page 17 out of 33 and page 16. And I'm referring to those because I see Beard, I see Robinson Road, and I see Kirshen / Shackelford making extensive growth. And what are we doing in terms of evaluating, having evaluations per school of what was done throughout the year, and what are we seeing as patterns that might have affect those growths, so that we can, like I said, not start to reinvent the wheel each year, but have it kind of have a dynamic where other schools are learning from some of the methods that were used, right? More collaborate. I know that we do a lot of collaboration, but more in that aspect of line of thinking.
So I'm going to work on this one. So in the area of mathematics, first you need to get consistent practices. So this year, as you know, we're piloting SWAN math in 10 of our schools. So next year, for those 10 schools, we'll take a look at which student groups performed at a higher rate, or which schools performed at a higher rate, and then determine what were, let's say, Shackelford doing as compared to Bret Harte. Both of them are SWAN. Now, when we go district-wide, we'll be able to do the same. Right now, currently, there's different things going on, so there's too many different things that fluctuate, so we really can't narrow in and determine specifics. However, year after next, we'll be able to do that. The other piece to this factor is also leadership. Leadership matters, and really looking at practices that principals use at the school sites relative to coaching their teachers and also providing professional development to their teachers. So that's another area that we're looking at. And then lastly, getting common assessments across. You saw that we had an assessment committee. Part of that, one of the primary purpose of that committee is to identify common assessments that teachers can agree on that are valid and help them in the classroom, that we can give district-wide, so then we can look at growth across the year and not just doing an autopsy at the end of the year. So we'll get there by the end of this year, hopefully, in each of the areas, both ELA and math, and then we need to move into the other subject areas as well, but we're going to go to the two heaviest hitters, which is ELA and math.
Great. Thank you so much for that.
Trustee West.
I had a question on the A through G graduates, and it said 43% of our graduating seniors met the A through G requirements. Do we have any figures on how many of those actually went on to a four-year school, or of the remaining students who didn't meet the A through G? Were there students who were given opportunities to do so if they wished?
We do have that ability. I don't have that data with you right now, but the neat thing is that the state now can use their ID to track where they go. So we know if they go into a four-year college. We know if they, the one piece that's a little bit harder for us to find out is if they go into the military. But we know if they go into a trade school or if they go to an out-of-state school. So we can look at that data. Yeah.
Okay, so no more lights. That's me then. I want to start out by acknowledging some really extraordinary achievement. That means I have to go into the weeds a bit. 5 years of consecutive improvement. Franklin Math, 4th grade. Franklin Math, 3rd grade. Fairview Math, 4th grade. Kirshen Math, 4th grade. Marshall Math, 6th grade. And Everett ELA, 5th grade. Every single one of those class grade levels has increased their performance every single year. I called it a unicorn. because it's very difficult to find, but I thought it was absolutely worth acknowledging tonight the work that those individual classrooms have done. Because it wasn't a matter of looking at whether the number was above or below, it was looking for change. And who has done so consistently over 5 years of testing, and I just thought that was worth acknowledging. The other one was Enoch's High School. And I think the paper mentioned this today, but they forget to look at the depth and breadth of what they've done there. Enoch's beats the state averages, not just for all students in English and math. They beat the state average for all students, economically disadvantaged students, Hispanic students, and African American students, every single category. And I thought that those were some things that I thought should be highlighted and acknowledged going into this, because there's a lot of work that went into this over many years, and I think it's important to acknowledge success in the midst of what isn't always good news when you look at these numbers. Questions. I want to go to, if we look at sort of what other folks have brought up on slide 5, it was the elementary dashboard. I think it's a question I've asked in previous years, and I think you may have answered it, Ms. Odell, when you sort of talked about internal assessments and how we sort of connect the disconnect between what an SBAC test is showing us on ELA and math fluency versus what our internal assessments. There's a disconnect, right? One showing, sort of junior high, really high pass rates, really high fluency rates, but they're not translating to the test. Does that make sense? Sort of internal versus external numbers.
One thing is, we know that the grade level standard from that assessment isn't necessarily always what we're teaching live in the classroom. We're working on that in bringing up the rigor of the classroom and making sure that the teachers are keenly aware of what they're teaching in the curriculum actually masters the grade level rigor. And so we can find that we'll choose, or even that's the danger in sometimes creating our own, because we have that tendency, we'll take an assessment that we know what we taught, whereas that's not the same on one of these state assessments. One of the things the teachers are really enjoying, and they're asking that we look at more of them, the IABs, these interim assessment blocks, they're mini blocks. They're mini SBAC tests. They can be given in a very short amount of time, and they're highly focused on a specific cluster of standards. And they're finding that it gives them immediate feedback, very quick feedback, that can support them in pivoting to what their students need for differentiation. So in our last assessment, ELA assessment committee, they were asking that we dig into them some more and look at them, because there's quite a few. I think we were talking about there's 15 different ones that they can use on specific areas that they've taught. And they may or may not be tied directly to the same passage that they taught in the curriculum. It's tied to the standard that they've taught in the classroom. Math has already gone this way. They really have been enjoying those IABs, and they're using them, and they've agreed upon those. ELA is still digging a little bit deeper on what does it mean for them in terms of those data-driven instructional decisions they need to make.
So my radar's working. I think on the following slide, which was the high school version of the dashboard, there were 3 things that sort of stuck out to me. I think the one on the lower right, the chronic absenteeism at 19.4, was a screaming red flag. I know that's something the superintendent was on top of as soon as you got here, but I think that's something that's certainly a red flag and concerning, because it's double what the elementary district is. And it makes me more nervous about, are those folks going to eventually end up being dropouts? How do we pick up on that? I think the IB numbers dropping 13% is another red flag that makes me nervous. I will defer to my right. Trustee Newman is far more familiar with the IB program than I am, but it was certainly a number that stuck out, especially given that the number of people taking tests increased. I don't know if that's the historic bit where way back in the day, not everybody took the SAT, and so the more people that took it, the scores drop because more people took it. Is it a
I've seen
inverse
that in
relationship?
multiple districts now, where when we open up the gate and we don't cherry pick the students, but we allow any student who wants to take the program, partake in the program. Sometimes those students, it's a bigger challenge. I welcome them to take on that challenge if they want it, if their family agrees on it. But I've seen that with AP tests. I've seen that with certain levels of math in middle school in the past in Fresno Unified. It can happen where we open up the gates and let more students take it should they wish, and sometimes those numbers of takers increase, which we know is also a gatekeeper for college to actually take the test, but sometimes the pass rate drops.
Okay, so my radar is working twice. I'm feeling better. The third thing on that slide that sort of highlighted me was nothing that Trustee Newman picked up was the AP score drop. I think I said a couple of years ago to somebody up here that I'm watching that as a canary in the coal mine. And it does sort of set off red flashing lights again because you got a significant drop here. I think one of the things that I'd like to see potentially in the future is how do we break that out so that we can see what the different variations of AP are, whether it's something as simple as saying, is this drop because one, not all colleges take all AP tests. I got a college student now, so I know that. But B, where is the segmentation happening? Are we losing students in science, chemistry, physics, math, statistics? Where is that drop off at, and what does that indicate to us as decision makers as to how to go back and support those things? It's not something I necessarily think is an answer tonight, but it's certainly something that I think would help in the decision process versus this great big bucket of AP, because it can be this really huge bucket that includes everything from A to Z versus science versus English versus history, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Keeping moving. I think the other one is how we look at change. I've looked at this as a 4-year thing, and what is the significant thing that says I'm going to look at change from point A to point B? And so you guys are looking at 1 year and 3 year. I looked at this year over 4. And the reason I chose 4 was because the first year's a flaky score because it's the first year we gave a test. And having watched some other presentations, I think it was consensus, you throw out the first year. And you sort of hold it as a reference point to sort of see where you were. But the real change starts 4 years forward, or when did we do something that changes? And so I think the things I'm going to set aside tonight are English language arts. This meeting last year is when we decided as a group to move forward to expand cabinet, to reorganize, to build capacity, to enable the change that we're all looking for. And I think that was extraordinarily important, and we can see that all around us. It's a much bigger table. And I think that it's going to take time to get there. And so I'm going to set aside ELA and assume that we're working on that because that was the reason we did all this. And so folks are going to have to give us a minute, whether it be the community or the press, because it's not going to happen in a quick second. Math, I have a question on SWAN. Is it standalone? Will it stand by itself as a K through 8 curriculum, or is it a supplemental? And does this, thank you, just working to sort of alleviate concerns, because I'm leaving a lot of things alone that in many previous years would have what little hair I have on fire. I think everything I've heard from fellow trustees and from what I've seen out there is that SWAN was the right decision. I'd like to see us bring that back at a future board meeting alone by itself and talk about how we roll that out. How does that look next year when we go 22 plus 4? That's 26 sites. What does that look like? And then how do we go about supplementing that as we connect it with what's going on at the 9 through 12 level? Because I think if we do them disjointed, we're going to get into trouble, if that makes sense. I see heads nodding, so I'm in good shape. I think I want to move, and I'm going to finish quickly. This is actually going much quicker than past years. Trust me, folks. I went back and watched previous board meetings. I can do this. I have questions for days. And those who've been here with me longer can assure you I'm much calmer. If I look at that one slide you had up with the grade span change, I think it's, which number is it? I had it written and I just moved it. It was essentially the change across grade levels 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 11, high school, and it was the averages, was ELA, and there was math. I think what I'm concerned about there, and it's actually interesting this year reading articles after the scores were released, I'm no longer alone. There's also other folks questioning the same things. And what I'm curious about is what we do to support automaticity, whether that be to math or whether it be to language decoding, phonics, patterns, because it looks when you move across that chart from sort of third grade forward, there's not carry forward. We're losing retention, if that makes sense. There's not retention there. And I think it's one of the things that was brought up that came out of the state report statewide. It's also a problem. And that how do we support not losing what we've taught, if that makes sense? Because then that question begs what we're doing in the classroom, what curriculum we're using, whether it be SWAN, what we're doing different with ELA to assure that when they leave third, fourth, fifth grade, they take what's there with them forward and build on it, which resolves our score problem internally, if I'm making sense again. Do I make sense?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to stop because I see Trustee Newman's light on.
Well, I have a comment. So if that's the appropriate time, I know this is just a board report. I think that's where we changed. So I just want to make the comment. As we look at these scores, I mean, they're not, we haven't gone down. That's the good news. But they're not where I want them to be. They're not where we want them to be. And so there's a big giant elephant in the room, which is the math score of 78% of our elementary students not meeting the standard and 76% of our high school students not meeting the standard in math. So as we look at that, that's a daunting task to take that on. And so, and I don't want to give that, you know, I know we're doing that. I really appreciate Ms. Adele's comments on what we're going to be doing and Dr. Noguchi's plan of action on that. But I want to make sure while we're addressing that we're looking at another thing, which struck me as I was going over these scores, which is the stagnant percentage of students who are exceeding or meeting the standard. So we live in a community where we are disproportionately not college educated like the rest of the state. In order for us to move that number, these numbers of students that exceed or meet the standard, that number has to move. And so look at the math one. We were in 2016, we're at 8%, and in 2019, we're at 8%. Unless that number moves, we can't move forward in terms of the students that can be ready for college level work. And because a student, that 8%, those kids are probably ready for college level math, I would hope. And that is maybe an indicator of that. And so, a good indicator perhaps. And so when we need to make sure that we see that number move. And so I know there's going to be a big focus on that 78 and 76%, but we have to see that number at the top move. That has to get bigger. So I just want to kind of want to lay that out there. Is that's my goal, is that not remain stagnant, because the number of students that are at or exceeding has been stagnant. It's not going down, which is good, but it's not going up. So let's that's something we have to consider as we move forward.
Well, and just in response to that, last year nothing changed.
Right.
So the scores here is a reflection of practices and programs that had been in existence for 3 or 4 years. This year we are working to do something different, K-8. We'll see how that pans out. That's why it's a pilot as opposed to going district-wide. And if district-wide then nothing moves and you just did something whole district, that's not where we want to be. I'm confident that that's not going to happen, but I need to see the numbers as well.
Yeah.
And that's just the K-8. As far as the high school, I don't see that you're going to see a change next year this time. However, going into next year, we as a math study committee are bringing forth recommendations for some changes because we recognize this isn't working. It's not working. It's working for some kids. It's working in some classrooms brilliantly, and in many, many, many other classrooms it's not. The question is, so what are we going to do about it? Right. So guaranteed next year you're not going to see a difference. However, I believe K-8 next year for those schools that we did do a pilot in this year, that you'll be able to see some growth there.
I just want to make sure that we're looking, we're talking about both ends of the spectrum of our students, and I want to make sure that we are addressing our students in the high end as well. And because we need to grow that number, the community wants it, and I believe that we have students who need it. So thank you.
And no disagreement. And that's essentially why I set aside what Superintendent just said. I actually look to see growth in math at the elementary level because of what we've done with SWAN. I'm actually looking to see some growth at the ALA level in K through 8. That was our focus last year at this meeting. When we did this LCAP meeting last year, that goal was to change direction, build capacity, and do some things that made a difference in the elementary district. High school's much tougher. I think the math study committee is coming back. I think what I'd like to see at K through 8, I have a submitted math plan that I submitted 18 months ago that covers everything from K through 12. One of the key indicators I put in that plan that applied to every single grade level in math was, are we focusing on the standard algorithm? Are we teaching these students to solve the problem the most reasonable, well-accepted way we've always done before? We add on 3 other ways that confuse them. And I think that is not unique to Modesto City Schools. That runs up and down this state, and I wish Arnoff was here tonight because it would be helpful to have his input. But I think there's an issue there. And Engage New York, which hopefully is on its very rapid way out the door soon, was very procedural and got very much into that philosophy of showing 6 ways, and it leaves students confused, not engaged. And we'll finish up. I think the one number I'll finish with is that our English language art number at high school could have been much higher. And it's something I found when I went and looked at the 4-year change. If I look at what's happened at high school English language art since we switched curriculum, and I'm not going to call names, I'll give numbers. High school 1, since we switched, down 13.2%. High school 2, down 13.3%. High school 3, down 11%. High school 4, down 9%. 5, 3%. 6, 2%. One school up 0.25% and one up 2.2. That's after switching. We're above the state average right now. We were above the state average 4 years ago. We would be much higher now, so I have questions and concerns with what we've done. And I've voiced them many times at this meeting when it comes to computers in classrooms. We adopted a board policy 6161 that says evidence of improving student outcomes. I think 3 years of evidence says we need to at least go back and take another look at that, because there is a significant downward move since we made that change, and I would rather look at it now than in 3 years from now, because in my mind, theoretically, we could be 10 points higher than the state. But we made a change, which is why you look at a point of change in a statistic. What did you change and what was the outcome? We made a change. The outcome has been downward. So let's go back and look at that again. Let's hope the math subcommittee comes back with good news. I think that needs to come back to the board at the high school level. I'm being quiet because that's what I've agreed to do. My plan goes comprehensive K through 12 for math. It's submitted 18 months ago. It addresses many, many issues. And I think if we're going to get something done and move forward, we do it together. Where we do best is when we're 7, 8, 9, 10 wide. And I think there's a way to do that. I think, as you've said, it's going to take a minute. Not all these numbers are good, and we're not alone. I think the state's in the same exact ball of paint that we're in. It goes across every single district. And I think I mentioned to Trustee Newman on a conversation this weekend. Even former State Board of Ed President Kirst said when interviewed about these numbers that came out this last week, he's dismayed and does not agree with what he didn't say. He does not understand why math is not carrying forward. It's a significant problem. It's statewide. How we solve it is local control. Let's think outside the box and let's find a plan and get these children rocking and rolling. And that's how you take something negative and try to be positive through all this mess, because there's a lot of negative here, but there was also a lot of positive with some of our schools. Trustee Irvin.
I just wanted to get clarification on the thing you said. You said we switched curriculums. How long ago did we switch curriculum?
4 years ago, we were using what we had. We're in the 3rd year of Study Sync now with 100% digital computers. The computers are the textbooks. Okay. I think that was part of the problem I had last year when I did not take the computers with my sophomore in English. We survived by the hair of our chinny chin chin without that computer. And for that reason, I took it again this year just because I want to get her through. But I think there are questions that need to be asked there because we were given a report at some point last year saying that was an indicator of positive change. If you look at the numbers from what we had before, when we switched, 3 years of assessments, every single number except 2 are down. And the 2 that are up are minor. One is 0.25%, and that's 7 of the 7 comprehensive day schools, high schools. Every single site has gone down. And I think part of what happened with Johansson last year, and it's why I ignored the number this year, Johansson had a very big fall. Johansson went down 20 points, and at this meeting last year, I said, I'm not paying attention to that number. Nobody drops 20% in 1 year. That's an outlier. They came back up 14% this year, got right back inside of the mean, and that makes perfect sense. But overall, ever since we put that program in place, test scores have dropped every single year at 5 of 7 sites. I think that's worth questioning, and I've questioned for many years this shackling to computers. I think they're a tool, not the tool. And I think that there needs to at least be a stand-back question that says, how much do we integrate computers into the classwork versus supplementing and embellishing and adding value versus it's the only thing in the room.
Okay, yeah, 3 years, yeah, I would agree. There needs to be some type of assessment to see, because it looks like that's enough time to get some data back.
And I agree. That's why I waited. I wanted to see what happened. Let's make evidence-based decisions. Let's be smart. One of my criticisms of Sacramento was that you never go back and look at what you did. You got an opportunity, let's go back and look at what we did. Let's revisit it. Let's see how we support it. Maybe it's essential as something supplementing or sort of you guys come up with the idea, but the question's out there, and I think it's worth asking.
Yeah, I agree.
Trustee Marks.
So just as we look at this, I know it's always how do we do? And so I appreciate that we have a chart that tells us how we did. So 17 out of 22 elementary schools improved in English language arts. 7 out of 22 in mathematics in elementary school and 2 high schools. So it does tell us we have a lot of work to do, but we are making progress, so that's a good thing. And I appreciate that we have a plan for the future, that you laid out, some things that we're working on, including the professional development. We'll see how that pans out, but I do agree that it does, the school site, who's the leader and how that leadership works at the school site does have a big impact on how the schools are, how the teachers are performing. But I also believe that the school climate has a huge impact. So teachers that feel that their voice matters, that they like to come to work, that they enjoy what they do, really does have an impact on how well they perform. So I don't know. I know that in our assessment in the LCAP, that was one of the questions on the school climate, that came out that we did meet that. So I'll have to dig deeper and find out what that really means in the questions that we asked. But I do know that I visited another school district and they're performing the highest in their area. And they, granted they don't have the exact population that we have, but I do know that their administrators and their teachers are working together, and they do go together in groups of 4 or 5 and view a classroom, and then afterwards they talk about what did they learn, what kind of teaching was being modeled in the classroom, and what could they emulate, and what could be improved upon. But it's not an evaluation process, it's a learning process to say, how can I as a teacher and I as an administrator help my teacher know this is a better way to get this subject taught in this classroom. But the teachers all talk to each other. The interesting thing I found was that their union and their administrators, and they all work together. And that, I think, has a huge impact on the collective learning ability of everyone in how they teach. And so that was really, for me, that was eye-opening. And listening to their dialogue, I couldn't attend there on a certain day that they did this, but they videotaped it for me so I could watch it and watch the interaction. And so they had a room like this. They all sat in the room and they all talked. And actually 2 of our former administrators were there because they stole them from us. But they were helping in that dialogue, and I thought that it was something that I don't know if we're doing this or trying to do any of that kind of interaction in our school district, but I know when we do professional development, there's some of that might happen, but this took a concerted effort. They're in their 6th year of doing this, 5th or 6th year, and I know it took an effort to actually implement this in their school district. So I don't know if that's something, if you've observed, because I've walked into classrooms, like some of the classes that you just mentioned that you pulled out as the nuggets, we'll call them gold nuggets of the night, those gold nuggets to me. I actually visited some of those classrooms on back to school night, and going with the superintendent into those classrooms, I was amazed. You could just see something special going on in that classroom, just as he or she was telling the parents of what their goals were this year. And the principal was very proud of the teachers that, when you see that change and you see that happening, I know that makes you just like, it's like you're the parent and you're just excited about what's going on. So I know some of those classrooms were some that I visited, but I know it's always hard getting the test scores. Every year we get them. We're always hoping we can make progress. And to see some of these, like 14% gains at Alberta Martone, I mean, that's huge. 13% gain at Bret Hart. 12% gain, and those were in English language arts. And then Robertson Road made a 12% gain in math, and that's huge. Just knowing, where those students come from and seeing that the work that's been done in those schools, I think is impressive. So I know our teachers are doing all they know how to do right now, and as long as we can help them have a greater, a greater understanding of how well they're doing, and then to be able to encourage them. I know when you have a positive about yourself, you'll just try all the harder. So thank you for all the work, and thank you for this really detailed report. This is what I like to see, so I appreciate that. I know it was a lot of work to do, but I so appreciate the written along with the PowerPoint. So thank you.
Okay, I'm going to agree and disagree briefly, and it's going to take 30 seconds. I agree that climate matters. I agree that this district has done monster work. Anytime you bring up those intervention centers, our suspension rates, our expulsion rates, what we have done is phenomenal. Anybody that questions that hasn't looked at the work that Mark and everybody else has done over these years. It is all-star work. I have yet to see it correlate to a single academic improvement. Somebody's going to have to show me where you make that connection. I think they're both important. I think they're both super important. Whether or not they affect each other is something I'm going to have to be convinced of, because we have done a phenomenal job there. But it doesn't seem to translate to the classroom on academics. I think they're both important because I've got kids. I think that they both matter. Whether or not they affect each other and correlate to grades and academics is something I still need to be convinced of, because I don't see it in the data here. I can't look at other places because I don't know what they've done, but I know what you all have done, and that work is extraordinary. With that, no lights, out to the public. Questions from the public? Seeing none. Back to the board for comments. This is a report. I think we've commented ourselves out, and I think we actually got it done in shorter than I thought it was. With that, we can move to the next item, or would folks like to take a quick break? Move to the next item. B3, report on special education inclusive practices. Get these ladies home.
Awesome. Thank you. Perfect. Thank you. All right. Well, good evening, Board President Walker, trustees, Dr. Noguchi, and Cabinet. I'm Christy Allen. I'm the Senior Director of the SELPA, and with me tonight I have Christina Romero, the other Director of the SELPA. And tonight we will be presenting to you reporting on information regarding inclusive practices within our SELPA. The purpose of this presentation is to provide the board with information as to why Modesto City Schools has an increased need for the inclusion of students with disabilities into the general education classroom. We will also provide the board with specific actions the SELPA will be taking to identify the ways in which we will be working to support the accomplishments of District Goal 1.6. And finally, we will be addressing any questions that the board may have regarding inclusive practices. Modesto City Schools is dedicating to supporting all students by providing equitable access to attain college and career readiness. And as a sub-goal, we are dedicated to meeting the goal of increasing access to general education for students with disabilities. We believe that this presentation will explain why increased inclusive practices are needed to help our students meet the demands of today's society and become college and/or career ready. As part of the SELPA's compliance and monitoring, the CDE reviews data from prior years in order to determine each LEA's performance on the state performance plan indicators. There are 17 indicators that look at areas like graduation and dropout rate, suspension and expulsion, and parent involvement, just to name a few. Our SELPA is proud to state that we have met a majority of these targets on a year-to-year basis. However, there are 2 areas that require improvement in both the elementary and high school district. These areas are how we ensure our students with disabilities meet academic achievement and how we support students in the least restrictive environment. Looking at this chart, Indicator 3C, which measures how students with disabilities achieved on state assessments, as well as Indicator 5, which looks at the way we serve students within the least restrictive environment. This chart shows in the 2018 data that Indicator 3C, where students with disabilities fell within the orange target for English language arts and red for math. And although we know that this is last year's information, we know that at this time there will not be a dramatic change to either of these data points for the 2019 year. This indicates substantial room for improvement and was an area that we were required to address as part of our PIR plan. Looking further down the chart, Indicator 5 is divided into 3 subcategories. Students who receive a majority of their education, at least 80% or more of their school day, within the general education setting. As you can see, the elementary district was able to meet this target with a rate of 57.85%. The second area is the percentage of time students spend within a special day classroom setting. They spend in a general education, And a specific target looks to identify the number of students who receive access to general education for at least 40% or more of their day. Looking at the number of students with disabilities being served in an SDC setting, for more than 60% of their school day, we missed this target by 1.66%. And for the final subcategory, the SELPA is monitored on the number of students who are sent to separate school settings. Examples of separate schools include our non-public schools like Sierra Vista. As you can see, the elementary district also met this target at 2.60%. Looking at the high school district, this chart shows that within indicators 3 and 5, the high school district's 2018 data fell within the red indicator for both ELA and math. And we did not meet the target percentages in any of the 3 areas that measure least restrictive environment. The data from both districts indicates that a majority of our students are struggling to access the curriculum in a meaningful way to ensure that they're able to maintain and generalize the information as would be demonstrated through our statewide assessments. As part of our performance review, the SELPA convened a work group of stakeholders who reviewed student achievement data and inquired as to whether there was a connection between achievement for students with disabilities and their lack of access to the general education instruction. The work group determined that there was additional need to focus on increasing inclusive practices across the entire K-12 system. I will now let Christina Romero provide you information as to how we will work within our SELPA to support the increased academic outcomes for students with disabilities.
Good evening. As Dr. Allen indicated, we're going to be looking at the implications of the data that she just shared with you all and how that's going to impact our district moving forward. In order to do so, it is important to note that our charge as a district and a SELPA in educating our students with disabilities is indicated by the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which we commonly refer to as IDEA. This is the standard for providing instruction to our students in relation to the least restrictive environment, and it states that we will ensure to the maximum extent possible that we would provide students with disabilities an education with their non-disabled peers. The IDEA, or Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, goes on to give us further guidance, stating that students should not be removed from the general education environment when the education of students with disabilities cannot be achieved satisfactorily through the use of supplementary aids and services, really just indicating that our job is to keep them with their typically developing peers, but to the maximum extent possible. Not only does the IDEA identify our requirement to educate students in the LRE, or least restrictive environment, but the inclusion of students with disabilities also provides a variety of benefits. In looking at inclusive practices for students with mild to moderate disabilities, the benefits for students include access to teachers who are credentialed in the subjects that they're being taught, the opportunity to receive instruction that is standards-based, the reduction of social stigma from peers, and increased access to typically developing students. This provides increased exposure to more complex language, more positive peer interactions, and appropriately modeled behavior. Additionally, the premise by which the Individuals with Disabilities Act was created is embodied in the students being educated with their typically developing peers. Students with moderate to severe disabilities also benefit from being included in the general education program. In addition to reducing the stigma that sometimes may be perceived to be associated with students with severe needs or impairments, inclusion provides students with greater opportunities to socialize with their peers, greater exposure to positive behavior modeling, and provides increased access to language models. This also increases the awareness of the typically developing students in regard to people with differences and disabilities as a whole. These impacts far exceed the classroom, resulting in social and community awareness as well as acceptance. While there are many benefits provided to both students with and without disabilities when participating together in the general education environment, that is not to say that there are not points for consideration and challenges to the idea of inclusion. At present, the culture around inclusion in our general area is a challenge. The Central Valley continues to host a variety of special day classes, segregated sites, and disability-specific programming not frequently found outside of the Central Valley. An additional challenge is ensuring that both special and general educators feel confident and supported in the work that they're doing for students being included in their rooms, both in meeting the individual needs of the child and in providing them with access to the core instruction where appropriate. This piece is essential in making inclusion meaningful for all participants. Finally, the logistics of schoolmaster schedules, service delivery schedules, provider assignments, student medical procedures, and other supports and services can also prove to be challenging in navigating the coordination of student inclusion. While there are challenges in the implementation of inclusive practices, our department has already begun working to support the move towards inclusion. Through the alignment of curriculum to standards in our mild to moderate classrooms at both the elementary and the secondary levels, the provision of professional development in universal design for learning, and the inclusion of special educators in general education curriculum training, we have begun to establish the foundation for our work. In addition, the establishment of the Performance Indicator Review Committee, or the PIR team that Ms. Allen discussed earlier, the increase in mainstreaming opportunities thus far has assisted in continuing the conversation about inclusive practices district-wide, as well as already begun to positively impact our students this school year. While we have begun this process, there are a variety of pieces that need to be implemented and ongoing work that must be completed in order to continue to progress in this area. The Inclusionary Practices Stakeholders Group that is comprised of representatives from general education, special education, and administration across the district will meet this year to discuss next steps and needed supports. Additional collaboration with both the teachers union as well as the classified bargaining unit would be needed to ensure that both groups are informed and supported moving forward. And finally, increased professional development opportunities for both special educators as they include their students, but also general educators in supporting students with disabilities in their environments will be offered moving forward. We believe, as a SELPA, that together with strategic focus and support in the aforementioned areas, that we are able to provide access for students with disabilities, that our district goals have established not only is important, but is essential to the growth and development of our educators and our students. We thank you for your time and would entertain any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for this report. One of my favorite topics again, Trustee Newman.
Thank you, both of you, for your report tonight. Is inclusion a state mandate? I mean, are we required by law to do this?
So IDEA indicates that we're required to provide access to general education and students' education as far as if they're special needs in the least restrictive environment possible. So the way that that's typically interpreted is in which way for each individual student with their individual needs is that maximized. So I wouldn't say it's the term inclusion, it's really about where they provided that service in the least restrictive environment is how I would phrase that.
So the IDEA, that's federal law, would require it to be in, they would call a special day class restrictive?
They would call a special day class restrictive. Simply because remember that the way that we define that term is access to our typically developing peers. So if I'm in a segregated classroom for the majority of my day, my access to students who are in my same peer group is minimal.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, 1.6, you get credit for that from me. I'm not arguing over 1.6 whether you met or didn't meet something. It probably doesn't get the legal threshold. Down below it, you're off by 0.8. I'm gonna call that a pass too. Just because, come on. I think the answer to my next question is probably already answered, but when you look at the red, orange versus elementary versus secondary, my guess is this is the same problem we have when we talk about reclassifying ELs. Now we're in secondary, we're in high school, it's much more challenging. My guess is here it's much more challenging plus some.
The gap gets larger, and I can let Dr. Allen address that piece.
But I mean, it's
secondary.
it's a very, moving that bar is going to be extraordinarily more difficult, correct?
Go ahead.
Well, and I would say that, but I would also say that a big part of our issues at the high school district is that we have feeder districts that come into us that we don't have control over for a large period of their education. So when they're gaining or accessing those foundational skills, they're not our students. So they come in where they come in, and then we have to backfill and remediate those skills.
There's a hurdle.
But we are working with our feeder districts right now. That's one of the things that we've been charged with within our department, is to build a collaborative nature with our feeder districts, with the ones that come to us the largest number of students. So we've met with the associate superintendents as well as some of their directors to talk about what it looks like moving forward.
Okay, why is this, and this is the one that sets off red flashing light, why culturally in the Central Valley is this so much more difficult? Because I know why there's certain things, but they're not special ed related, like counseling and psychologists. They're not here. You get evac down to Fresno or Sacramento or the Bay Area. So that's lack of services available.
So I think
this sounds different.
And I'll just give you what I like to call a Chrisism, right? It's just my interpretation, because that's all we're really doing is speculating. But I would say that in the Central Valley, and Mark's been in the business a lot longer than I am because he's way older. But honestly, in the Central Valley, we have a lot of services that people move here to access. Our regional centers are incredibly involved. We provide services, our autism programs throughout this area are renowned for the way in which we staff programming and what we do for students. So I would say that there's just been a historical perspective in which the programs that we've designed are so impactful and do such a good job that sometimes that inclusion piece maybe isn't the way we go, simply because we're doing well in the programs that we have established.
What's a challenge due to success?
Exactly.
That sounds a lot better than what I read. So.
I think that I think we have a lot of room to grow with regard to providing that inclusive model for our kids. And I think that, as we kind of discuss, the benefits are huge, and we're not providing them with that access at this time in the way in which we would like to. So it's just an area of growth for us right now.
How does the parent input provide into this? Because when I think of, and you call it inclusion, exclusion, I call it push in, pull out. When they decide their child is or isn't, where does that bargain come into play? Because you've got IDE on one side here, but you got mom and dad over here, you got us in the middle.
So we're a team, right? Yeah, it's a collaborative team. And so, we want to take input from all stakeholders in that group because we all see a child a little bit differently. A general education teacher sometimes in their classroom what a child is struggling with looks very different than what the parents are seeing at home. So we don't want to dismiss that at all, but we want to have those conversations that are collaborative that ensure that we're addressing all of the child's needs. And it's our job as experts in that field to be able to convey what we see that's data driven, to be able to support those parents in helping us to make and arrive at the right conclusion for their kid. So that's important, I think, as well.
I'm a fan of everything you guys do. Always, I mean, it's amazing work and challenging. And something I came up with school site councils with a friend of mine who's a parent of autistic children. And it's always something I've looked at and great amount of faith in you guys, and thank you for the report. Trustee Brown.
I'm going to ask the hard question that a lot of the public is asking. When we look at inclusion, we see the benefits to the students with disabilities, but we also look at the entire classroom and see that there are disadvantages to some of the other students when so much attention is suddenly addressing the needs of the special education student. How do we raise the bar for academic achievement and satisfy all of these needs at once?
I think that's a great question, and obviously that's the difficult piece in our charge. I think it boils down to really empowering teachers that are providing those services and that education to students to feel as though they are confident in scaffolding, in modifying, and being able to provide those students with the same rigor, but maybe at a different pace. So I think supporting our staff is huge. I think the infrastructure and ensuring that, like you were just indicating, that it doesn't take away from the rest of the classroom, but it adds and contributes to the classroom environment. I think that's huge. I think that is part of our challenge. And I think the stakeholder group that we've established that we'll be meeting throughout the year is really to determine what are those pieces that would be needed for all, right? Not just like I said earlier, not for just the students with disabilities to benefit, but for the general education peers in the classroom to benefit, for the teacher to feel confident and that it's powerful and meaningful, both special educator and general educators to feel that it's worthwhile, and to gain something from that. And I think that's really that next step is, what does that infrastructure look like? What does the professional development require for people to feel confident in what they're doing every day?
And I would just go on to say, I believe what ends up happening when we move into more special day classes, especially for students with our mild to moderate disabilities, we end up watering things down, and I think that's where our achievement is where it is. To be honest with you, I think that we have to continue to provide the rigor and the support, as Chris had mentioned. Trustee Brown, this would not come without additional support for general education to make sure that we could do this. And like Trustee Walker had said, it's just the difference between pulling things out and having the person come into a special ed environment versus taking all of our resources and pushing it into general ed.
So just to follow up, in all my years of education, it has felt like we're not supported with the federal mandates. We don't have the money
Not even close.
to provide what we need to for our special ed kids. What can we as a district do to be helping to drive that message where it needs to go?
You want us to get that? You want me to get that? So I mean, I think there are a variety of opportunities that we have in our role through Legislative Action Day, which is when we take a group of parents and we do lobby once a year and get to meet with all of our representatives with regard to special education funding. We have students that come with us that talk a little bit about their story, what they felt that they needed in high school if they've already graduated, or if they're still in school, kind of what they see as struggles that they have to overcome. That's one avenue. I think the other avenue also is being creative about the way that we do it, as opposed to saying, hey, we need increased X, Y, and Z. I think just being really cognizant of the things that we do have and maybe ways to adjust those resources to provide the same amounts of support, but in a different way, a different arena, a different methodology to ensure that our students have access.
Yeah, the only thing, the ladies do one heck of a good job on making sure that our programs run in a fiscally responsible manner, but still meet the needs of our kids. The other thing is they're part of a powerful group. SELP administrators are part of the Coalition for Adequate School Funding, which the overwhelming majority of SELP administrators are a part of. That is a very, very powerful lobbying group that meets not only with state but federal legislators on the issue of school funding. But you're right, we're grotesquely underfunded by the federal government.
don't see any more lights, and I certainly don't agree with that last statement. With that being said, out to the public for questions or comments. Seeing none, back to the board for comments. I'll just say thank you. You guys do a fantastic job. I think it's amazing what you do, and I think to Trustee Brown's question on money, I think one of the things we found last year in the budget is how well you guys managed that money and actually found ways to save when it's not encouraged to save. And if my fellow board members want to go do a economic backflip and learn about maintenance of effort, which says don't be efficient with your money, is extraordinary, and it will cause your brain to do like backflips. I still have a hard time processing that calculation that says if you do better, you're actually doing worse. And I don't know how you square those two things up. And I remember the day that Mr. Herbst, and I believe it was Mr. Zerley, explained it to me at a conference, that special ed and money and maintenance of effort, when you sit down and put those pieces in front of you and try to square them up, if you think logically, you're going to need your own intervention at the end. With that, ladies, thank you very much for the presentation. Takes us to B4, report on Modesto City Schools Intervention Center 7 through 12. This should be another very good story. Welcome, Mr. Miller.
Thank you. Let me get my notes here. Is this the, do I just hit that? Point up there? Good evening. My name is Ed Miller, Director of Child Welfare and Attendance. Good evening, Board President Walker, Trustees, Superintendent Noguchi, Cabinet. This evening I'll be presenting a report on the intervention centers in grades 7 through 12. The purpose of tonight's presentation is to provide the board an update on the intervention centers at our junior high and high schools. Before we look at the intervention center data, it's important to know that Modesto City Schools is committed to creating an environment where students experience positive educational outcomes while at the same time maintaining safe schools and orderly learning environments. Our district has worked diligently to reduce suspensions and expulsions for all students. The tremendous work that we've done in this area is due in part to the evolution of our intervention centers. This evening I will review what our intervention centers are, as well as review the data that we have collected. Lastly, I will present steps we've taken to improve our intervention centers as well as our next steps. Modesto City Schools implemented intervention centers in the spring of 2014. The original staffing included rotating teachers and an intervention center monitor. We recognized through collaboration with district staff and teachers that there was a need to have full-time certificated teachers available to provide a higher quality of direct support to students. In the 2016-17 school year, full-time intervention center teachers were placed at the 9-12 schools. Intervention center teachers teach, establish, and reinforce expected behavioral standards and provide academic assistance to students. Intervention center teachers also communicate with classroom teachers to coordinate assignments and student work. During the same year, intervention center specialists were placed at all of our 7-12 schools. Intervention center specialists are contracted through the Center for Human Services. They provide short-term education, prevention, and intervention services to students to build life, social, and coping skills. Last year, full-time intervention center teachers were added to our junior high schools. Additionally, high schools have an intervention center monitor. And I'm going to use the term IC as I go through this instead of repeating intervention center, if that's okay. The IC monitor checks students into the IC classroom and records student attendance. The IC monitor also assists in collecting and returning student work to the classroom teacher. Our assistant principals of student supervision and attendance direct the work of each 7-12 site-specific IC team. The goal is to provide students the support they need and an opportunity to learn important life skills. Our ICs are comprised of a dedicated team of individuals that are tasked with identifying ways to support all students. Our intervention centers have focused on providing social-emotional, evidence-based practices to maximize academic and social behavior outcomes. Behavioral interventions and academic supports are provided for struggling students. This Tier 2 and Tier 3 support focuses on changing individual student behaviors. The IC provides a location on our junior high and high school campuses where students can examine their behaviors in a structured setting. Students go to the IC in lieu of receiving punitive consequences. Students receive personalized, targeted assistance to help them address their behavioral and academic issues. The goal is that students reduce repeated misbehaviors and learn new life skills. Our ICs provide many benefits. By providing alternative means to address behaviors that would have previously resulted in students being sent home on suspension, students are kept in school. Students now receive counseling and other interventions to address their specific challenges by teaching them life skills and behavior strategies. These interventions and supports have reduced the number of students that are out of class. Moreover, in the past, struggling students that were sent to the in-school suspension room were not permitted to participate in extra and co-curricular activities on the day of their in-school suspension. However, students now receive counseling and other interventions that are allowed to participate in extra and co-curricular activities. Part of this process is connecting students to school. We know that students that are involved in school activities are more successful. This chart illustrates the dramatic improvement Modesto City Schools has made when looking at home suspension and previous in-school suspension days when compared to the intervention centers. The bottom dashed blue line with orange dots represents the number of 712 home suspensions over the last 9 years. As you can see, there has been a very steady decline in home suspensions over this period. We do recognize that home suspensions have plateaued during the past several years. The top solid gray line at the left represents the number of students that were sent to the in-school suspension room for all-day in-school suspensions. The dashed black line at the top right illustrates the transition to intervention centers in 2013-14. Modesto City Schools is changing the climate on campus with the implementation of positive behavior interventions and supports, restorative practices, and intervention centers. These three initiatives work together in changing the climate on campus from a punitive, consequences-based mindset to that of focusing on changing student behaviors. One of the key data points we track is the number of times a student receives services through the intervention center. As noted earlier, one of our primary goals is to keep students in class. This data table compares the 2017-18 school year to the 2018-19 school year. This chart shows the total number of non-duplicated high school students in 2017-18 versus 2018-19. The term non-duplicated indicates students were only counted once. For example, in 2018-19, there were 2,489 individual students that visited the intervention center. When comparing the past 2 years, it's important to note that there were 969 fewer students in the intervention center last year. It's important that we continue to monitor and track this data to identify trends that may help us better support students. I'd also like to point out that over the past 2 years, 48.6% of students and 47.3% of students that required intervention center services did not return for a second visit. Furthermore, the number of students that required significant interventions and supports, which tonight we will define as visiting the intervention center more than 4 times, declined significantly. During the 2017-18 school year, there were 651 students that visited the intervention center 5 or more times versus 397 last year. This chart shows the total number of non-duplicated junior high school students during the 2018-19 school year. As we begin to establish our baseline data in our junior high intervention centers, there are a few data points that stand out. 43% of junior high school students that required intervention center services did not return for a second visit. 443 of the 551 junior high students have received services and interventions visited the intervention center 4 or fewer times. That's 80%, 80.4. One of the many ways we support the students in the intervention center is the availability of the intervention center specialist. Not every student needs to see the IC specialist. However, those students that do are given a survey to assess their perceptions within several areas. When reviewing last year's data from 712 student exit surveys, 96% of students agreed they felt listened to. Remember, these are students that oftentimes arrive upset, frustrated, and are having a bad day. 86% felt capable of handling the rest of their day. 79% stated they were better able to handle their problems in the future, and 81.6% felt they had benefited from their time in their intervention center. When looking at data by student ethnicity, it is evident that we remain disproportional. While African American students are 2.8% of student enrollment, they make up 6.6% of intervention center visits. White, Asian, and American Indian students make fewer visits to the intervention center when compared to their overall enrollment. When we disaggregate our IC data further, we can see our socioeconomically disadvantaged students, special education, English learners, and foster youth are all overrepresented in the percentage of intervention center visits compared to overall student enrollment. This slide details the total number of strategies utilized within the 712 intervention centers during the 2018-19 school year. It's important to note that a single student visiting the intervention center may receive more than one of these interventions, supports, or services. One of the key aspects of the various strategies employed is that the intervention center teacher is able to provide numerous strategies to support students while they're out of their primary classroom. Students are often asked to complete a reflective writing assignment to begin the process of self-reflection as to the reason they were referred to the intervention center classroom. Each student's interventions are personalized based on their specific situation. Strategies may also include restorative practices, such as restorative conversations, developing restorative apologies, a restorative conference, and reintegration after a home suspension. Academic interventions may include an academic review of the student's progress, classwork or homework completion, a writing activity, or reading assignment. Behavior interventions may include a behavioral review, de-escalation, response to a video, and/or a conflict mediation. Key to this process is that students may also be referred to additional site-based supports or outside services. This may include a referral for a student success team evaluation, a medical review, additional counseling with a student assistant specialist, or an administrative referral. It is not uncommon for students and their parents to be referred to additional counseling services outside of our school and district capabilities. The commitment and investment of resources within our 712 schools to support behavioral and academic interventions as the primary response to struggling students has been dramatic. Our district is proud of the work that we've done in this area. However, this is not to say we aren't looking for ways to improve. First and foremost, we must continue to calibrate and refine our data collection practices. Next, we will continue to analyze our intervention center data to identify areas of growth. Our district is also using this data to identify additional supports and services for students. Likewise, school sites are using intervention center data to identify site actions to address various needs and areas of concern. This process of data collection and analysis is critical in our efforts to engage in a continuous cycle of improvement. In the future, we will continue to collect student voice to determine if there are other means by which we might better support our diverse student population. As mentioned earlier, our junior high intervention centers are a bit behind in their development as compared to our high schools, so more additional support and attention is required here. We must work together to define what the success criteria is for our intervention centers. Finally, our district is currently offering increased professional development opportunities to all staff in the areas of restorative practices, culturally responsive teaching, and trauma-informed strategies. The success of our intervention centers has been truly a team effort. I'd like to recognize the special efforts put forth by our intervention center teachers, support staff, site administration, and district staff. It is a result of their combined efforts that this approach has been a true success. Thank you for listening to this presentation. At this time, I'd like to open it up to any questions.
Thank you, sir. Trustee West.
Thank you for the report. I have a question on, are there any behaviors that would not be appropriate for this? For instance, if a student got into a fight. I know in years past that was an automatic suspension because the student might be a danger to others. So students who get into a fight, or would they be referred to the IC, or would they be, what normally happens? Are their behaviors not appropriate for that room?
Usually most behaviors that are considered a danger to other students, you know, it could be fighting, could be an attack or an assault, could be weapons, could be sales, maybe distribution of drugs, that kind of stuff. Those are normally home suspensions.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Trustee Irvin.
Have we ascertained as to the reason why the African American suspension rate? I mean, I see going rates is still almost 3 times the population.
The population. I'm going to probably defer. We have Dr. Akanafwa conducting a study, and so I think we're going to probably some of the same reasons those students are suspended, possibly. I don't want to speculate though. You know, we're doing a 2-year study on that exact issue, and we have an outside expert. I'm not trying to get away from that question, but I can't really come up with this is why it's all happening.
Yeah,
And I could be the outside expert.
Trustee Irvin, we want to continue to analyze it on some of the groups, even in the intervention center. It doesn't quite mirror, actually it's a little bit less, but some of our home suspension rates, so it's still ongoing. Students with disabilities is another one that comes up. I think that we're over our percentage there. We'd like to get that down. Same thing on the other end. The benefit, though, that I would want to point out, and even then this is Director Miller had said, you know, we really need to identify what success criteria looks like in those intervention centers. And what that went on to say is that there's a number, intervention centers have been used as, not only you can go to the intervention center and have not been in trouble for anything, to be honest with you. I mean, you could go need it for in a way to time out, something going on at home, et cetera, and you can be sent to the intervention center. That isn't tracked separately. That's still shown as a visit into that center, if that makes sense. So I still think that we need to fine tune that before we get to the true number. So that's what we'll be working on this year.
Okay.
Trustee Brown.
The questions that were asked of the students as to the effectiveness of the time they've spent in the intervention centers, are these addressed to them the first time they are at the center? Are we seeing that the effectiveness is maintained when they're there multiple times? So we see that some students are there as many as 10 times in the school year and even more. So are we assessing them across the board or just the first time they come?
Do you
Assessing them across the board.
Dr. Domi know that? I don't
know. Every time that they would come in and meet with the student assistants, but well, it's the intervention center specialist, what they're called in that room. But yes, they would be asked to fill out a form, completely voluntary. But yes, they're asked to fill out the form.
So they're doing it each time?
Each time.
Yeah.
Trustee West.
Following on that, are teachers also asked how they feel about the effectiveness? Do we have any data on that?
Actually, we do, and it's a shame. When I did the Center for Human Services Power presentation, I want to say in July, I had received the information. It's a shame I could put it in a board communication, but teacher feeling on the intervention center has been very, very, very positive. Very, very positive. I apologize. In the July PowerPoint, I talked about teacher effectiveness of the clinicians that they feel that are on campus, but they actually have it for the student assistance specialist program as well, or the intervention center specialist.
That would have been good to add, but.
Trustee Marks.
So just a few questions. One, does Center for Human Services, are they helping us with the intervention centers? They are, correct?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I thought they were because I was.
That's the intervention center specialist, they
That's
call
what I
them.
thought. Okay.
There's one in each, yeah.
Each site. So they will work with our students if they want counseling, or they will meet with them. Is that correct?
Yeah, I hesitate to use the word counseling, but yeah, they
I
will
know.
provide social emotional support to
Okay.
those students, skill building, et cetera. Yeah, they will engage in restorative conversations with them, talk about next steps, goal setting, check-in, check-out type stuff for the students, yes.
Conflict
Okay.
mediation, de-escalation.
Okay.
Sometimes the student's really upset, they just take them and calm them.
Okay. And then,
Good.
so the students that come in just one time and they go back to the classroom, they'll have more instruction than the student that came in 5 to 10 times because they're in their classroom with their teacher. Are we tracking how well they're doing? The students who come in, say one time, if they're improving, are we tracking anything where the students that come in multiple times, if they need more help or they're, so I'm just going to say, if I'm a student and I'm having a really rough time, and I've had to go in, let's say 8 times, and I've had multiple teachers send me in there. Maybe we haven't assessed why I'm being sent there, but at this point, there's something going on. So are we tracking how those students are performing after they go back to the classroom? Let's just say I'm getting D's and F's in my class, and then I've got behavior problems. So I'm really having a hard time at school. So are we tracking any of these students to see if they improve? So let's say I go there my 8th time, and then after that, did I get better? In a month, did I move from a D to a C? Did I move to a D to a B? Did something change? Are we tracking any of that?
Last year, one of the things that Associate Superintendent Godot put in place, and I believe it was helpful, was when a student would go to the intervention center numerous times, they recommended to all sites that they start doing student success team meetings on those kids, and that sets up that kind of data tracking that you're looking for. But at this point, based on what Director Miller has, there's not a cross reference. But I mean, I could just tell you, and again, this is I don't want to use the term criticism, we'll call it a markism. I would suspect the more students coming into intervention center, probably there's a correlation with their struggles in academics. I don't think that a lot of our repeat 8 to 10 that are coming in there are doing very, very well academically would be my hypothesis. Again, I'd have to do a cross-reference on that, would be my hypothesis.
Okay. And then let's see, I thought I had one more question I was going to ask. So do we know if the students that did not return from school because they left school, that they did not return to the intervention center, do we know if they left school, or is it because they actually helped in the ways that you stated, that they were helped and they felt like they didn't need to return? Do we know?
To the intervention center,
Right.
return to the intervention
Do we know
center.
why they didn't return the intervention center?
Well, we're hoping, you got to remember there's tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, without getting into that whole presentation. Tier 3 are
that's
your
right.
most difficult. It's like a pyramid, remember?
Yeah.
Tier 3 are the top 5%, tier 2 are 10, and then the 85%. I'm going to have a hypothesis like
Mark.
Mr. Herb said. A lot of the kids who come only one time, probably they were more leaning towards your tier 1 kind of kid. It would be nice if a tier 2 or 3 kid came in one time and we worked our magic and they never needed to come back. There could be some of that, but it's hard to say. You have to hope this having the impact, but the impact is, I can't remember, I'd have to go back to the slide. It was like 80% or 46% only went one time.
Right.
So you're hoping they're reaching that kid and going, hey, what's going on? Why are you behaving like this in class? You're disrupting the whole class.
And they really do a great job in there. I mean, to be honest with you, some of the data that Ed shared, I would say the highlight is the reduction across the board. The number of kids that are in there one time, overall numbers down, everything else, all those key indicators down, which in my mind just reaffirms that what's going on in there and the hard work and effort that those teachers and the IC specialists are doing is worthwhile work.
One thing I noticed I'm going to go back to this one chart. We added the intervention center teachers around 2016-17. Look at the downward trend once we put full-time teachers out there. So I say that's kind of a strong impact. It was a good move going to the full-time teachers. The rotating teachers, we had some issues earlier on where you get some people in there, maybe they weren't monitoring like they should have. It's great having full-time teachers in there.
Okay, thank you.
I'm coming to you, Trustee Irvin. One quick pickup, because one of the things that's gotten said is got sent to the intervention center, and I think we need to qualify the difference between being sent and volunteering to go, because as you said, you'll count them for walking in. I can assure you that my 9th grade daughter who used that intervention center never got sent, but I told her anytime she was having a hard time in a day with a particular class or two, reach up, call timeout, head over to the intervention center, sort of get squared back up. That would have gotten counted every single time. And she probably rolled 7 or 8 counts that year. But what mattered was that we had agreed as a family that there was an outlet for you when you were having a hard time for whatever reason to reach up and call timeout and just roll over there and sort of get yourself back together. And that would get counted. And that's not being sent. That's us sort of taking advantage of a service. And that would have gotten folded into the counts, and I think that needs to be sort of factored in. Not everybody's sent. There are some that are just going because they know there's something there for them that lets them sort of time out. And I think that's an extraordinarily important service that folds into this whole concept of how we're helping and do they know to take advantage of our services. Trustee Irvin.
I just wanted to piggyback on Mr. Hertz when he said that the student with disabilities is also disproportionately in the IC centers. Do we have that data as well?
Yeah, he actually showed it on the
I can go
one of
back
the
to
last
it.
slides. Percentages are a little high. My guess, knowing what I know, is we're talking students with mild to moderate disabilities, probably those students in the learning handicap classes, probably students with the resource specialist
All
program.
four of those groups that you
Yeah.
see are
You'll see-
overrepresented.
you'll see, that's what I was referring to. Trustee
So
Irvin.
they're mainly in the mild moderate range.
Yeah, my guess, and I couldn't speak to it for certainty, but I would assume that not very many of our severely handicapped individuals would be going into the intervention center. That's those type of behaviors are usually handled in classroom.
Thank you.
Okay, so I guess the only other question or comment I would have is to the disproportionate issue. I think we also have to be cognizant of the math. And I think this is tricky, and I don't know how much trouble I'll get in here, but I'll say this. Trustee Irvin, when we look at the African Americans who exceeded on the CASP, mathematics, there's 9%. 9% is 10 students. 10 students at 2 high schools comprise 9% of the juniors in this district. And so I think that we also have to be cognizant of the math and saying that I think everybody's important, every student counts, everything is there. I don't know, and anybody else can, I think we've done a phenomenal job at addressing these issues. But if each student counts as 1%, it's very difficult to say that I think the idea is to try our best. And I think that's the critical point. Does that make sense in the sense of how you measure? It's not a happy bit, but
Yeah,
one is 1%.
Yeah, 1 is 1%. We're trying to get to 0%. So, I mean, in that scheme of things, the numbers are the percentages or numbers are still relevant.
No, they are. I agree.
Are 500 students, it's still relevant. And yes, we have done quite a bit, to, the credit of our staff here and things like that. So I'm just wondering about how we continue to do what we're doing. And so I just want to make note of that. Yeah, it's dropping, and I know it's going to continue to drop. So I just want to shed some light and get some insight on, the things we are doing. So people, when they come at me, I can explain that in a way that they understand. So
I hope we are. I really do. I think that those complaints, we don't hear that as much. I just don't. When you say disproportionate now, we're looking at a legal number. Are we under or above what a state average is? And that gets very, very difficult if we were talking about Filipinos or American Indians. I think it ends up missing the point when we get down that avenue too far, because I think what everybody's done is phenomenal. And I think at some point, I think we look at whether or not I would argue, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, at this point, we're not suspending anyone unless you've literally crossed a threshold that says we don't have a choice. I mean, we're not suspending, am I making sense at that point?
Yeah, we stopped that a long time ago. We are not, I've heard speakers come up here and talk about a kid rolling their eyes or not bringing a pencil to class. That's not happening.
No, I would agree. I just wanted to affirm that point.
Supporting what you just said.
Yep.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
No, and the work that went into this in 2011 and 12, and Trustee Marks, you've pointed this out, Modesto City Schools was years ahead of others that were doing this. And you talked about at one point in the story where we were releasing suspension data in other school districts going, why would you do that? Why in the world would you do that? And so we were leading that sort of edge, and I think we benefit from that now. I think it put us in a very difficult position and allowed people to do a lot of heavy criticism. But I think being transparent and doing what we did in the long run has benefited everyone, because we were ahead of this curve long before others were. And I think that's worth crediting all the hard work that everybody's done on this issue. And I sound like a broken record because I say this every time this topic comes up, but it's amazing work. And I think it benefits all of our students, the ones that get sent and the ones that go voluntarily. Trustee Marks.
Okay. So just as we look at the next steps, and I'm looking at the one that says define what the success criteria is for our ICs. That second to last one. I'd like to see us track the academics of the students that are being referred, see how they're doing. We're already tracking ethnicity, which I believe is really important. And as we maybe hear from Dr. Aquanafo, some of the practices that we have, or some ways we can maybe be more sensitive to our students in a different way and find out how can we help them better to achieve better. So I'll look forward to hearing what he has to say, but I'd really like to see us track our academics with the students and see, you know, to me that's a measurable for our success, but maybe you have some other ideas on that. Mr. Herbst?
No, we could definitely take a look at, or as much as we can with the academics. That's a large number. I would venture to say, and I still appreciate what you said, because obviously we want both. Our number one priority over there is to make sure that whatever the misbehavior was, or whatever potentially got them in an intervention center, is addressed so that they're not coming back. Because academics could be behavioral charge. It also could be motivation, could be academic struggle charge, and the intervention center will never ever touch that. That being said, I do think that there is a way for us to potentially look at how we're doing academically with some of those kids, or at least take a snapshot of it to see what their success rate is after.
Well, if I'm getting in trouble at school, I obviously don't want to be there. So if there's a way that we can help students have a greater desire to be in the classroom, and if we can address whatever's creating that environment, that they don't feel they're just not happy to be there. Obviously, they're very pleased with the intervention center and the time they spent there. I don't know if I know we're addressing some of their behavioral issues. I don't know if there's a way we can also address some of their academics, or give them some prompts maybe the teacher might have that we could add to whatever they're doing in that time. I'm going to call it time out, that we're addressing that time with them. So I'm just trying to figure out, as a board, how can we have some measurables so we can see how successful we are. And granted, I appreciate the questions that were asked of the students, and then ask the teachers, has the behavior changed in the classroom as well? That might be another question that we ask of the teachers that actually did send them there. And because the ones that weren't sent there, obviously they were glad they went. So at least that's what it sounded like. So those were my ideas. I don't know if anybody else has any ideas on how to define what success would look like in the ICs.
Unless you want to address, I think we're adding on. I think we've done a fantastic job.
Yeah, I just, to me, and I appreciate always looking at something else, and I think that Ed's right. We're constantly looking for ways to improve, but honestly, I was incredibly happy with what I saw, and honestly, a tribute to the work that Mr. Godot did last year. I was only involved in certain parts of the intervention center, but Brad really had his hands in it significantly last year. But I mean, I was incredibly pleased with the numbers. Like I said, the amount of kids overall that are in those intervention centers, the decrease in the number of multiple or kids that have to keep coming back, decrease in the number of students that are 10 over. To me, that's a mark of a successful intervention center program, in my opinion.
All right. Seeing no other lights, out to the public. Seeing no public comment, back to the board. Comments or questions? I think it's an incredible success story, and has been and continues to be. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Let's
Thank you.
take 10 here before we jump into policies. We're down the back stretch. We'll knock out 3 policies in a quick minute here. We're going to look like rock stars. Let's take 10. B6, back on me. I'm still trying to get done quick, see? Approval of the first reading of proposed draft of Board Bylaw BB 9321. This is closed session. This came back. Here's where you admit you made a mistake. The last time we read this policy, I brought it forward. I sent the wrong copy and we approved the existing board bylaw. So we didn't approve the new one. And so this is essentially bringing back closed session as a board bylaw. All this essentially states is what the legal requirements for what is in closed session and what is not. And that's essentially what it is. Are there questions or comments from board members? Trustee Newman.
It just appears that and I think it'll be corrected when we get it printed out in regular form, but the titles are kind of all, they're kind of floating in the document. So you've got the BB 9321 is on line 2 or 3, and then the title's floating. So we just need to make. Yeah, we just want to make sure when it gets printed that the titles aren't floating in odd spots. They were. Yeah, they were floating all over in odd spots.
If you try to edit them when you convert it, it does the same thing. Microsoft Word is not a user-friendly guide with some of this.
So we just need to make sure it formats correctly. Otherwise, it looks great.
Okay, 2-1.
That's how it went. That's how it's printed.
Yeah.
Just like that. Yeah.
Oh, it's happened on a number of pages.
Yeah.
So the question we have is on anything other than formatting. Seeing none, out to the public. Questions or comments? Seeing none, back to the board. Looking for comments. Seeing none, motion to approve here. Looking for a second. They're over there. Just race. Okay, so motion was by Trustee Newman. Second was Trustee Brown. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Passes unanimously. So now we're on to, I have to work off of 2 sheets of paper here because the computer's not right. So we're on to now B7A. BP 0410, Non-Discrimination Education Programs and Practices. Mr. Beauchesne, who is extraordinarily good at what he does. You have the floor, sir.
I appreciate your compliments, trustees, Dr. Noguchi, and members of cabinet. I present to you Board Policy 0410 for a first reading. This is being brought forward because the district does not have this board policy in its inventory, and it was one of the board policies that was recommended during the audit and review. At this time, if there are any questions about this board policy in its current form, I'm ready to field those questions.
Trustee Marks.
So just at the end of this sentence on BP 0410A, so just before all of the CFs, the last sentence says, and then it says resources and data collected by the district shall not be used directly or by others to compile a list, registry, or database of individuals based on race, gender, sexual orientation. I just was trying to understand because we already collect data on all of those, not all of them, but on gender, race, mostly gender and race. So how does that work on this policy?
So this is being referred to, not that it can't be done for the purposes of a school program. The concern here is that the data would be used in a manner that would violate Attorney General Becerra's concerns regarding limiting working with immigration, essentially. There was
That's not what I would have thought.
Okay.
Some guidance and model policies to assist California's K-12 schools in responding to immigration issues. This was put out in April of 2018 by California Attorney General Becerra. And this particular language is meant to comport with that, as well as, I'll give you the citation here. Education Code 234.7, which also goes to limiting assistance with immigration enforcement.
So, just to clarify it, would as it relates to immigration be a good closing just phrase at the end of that statement? Because when I read it, it doesn't have anything in there. Though it does address, it says, or immigration status, but it doesn't say that that's really why this list is being compiled. That you as a district aren't allowed to collect this list for that reason. But you can collect it if you want to understand what your suspension rates are, or what your, any other kind of information that you're trying to understand better, so you might address it. So would it be as it relates to immigration? Since that's what the actual law states? Or I'm just asking for clarification, because it basically says, don't collect any of this data. Don't collect it at all.
Trustee Newman, jump in, then I'll come back to you, Irvin.
Well, the important language in this is that it shall not be used directly or indirectly by others. So we can collect it. I mean, because we're serving our students, we're in terms of providing the programs that our students need, we can collect that information so that we can provide the services and programs that they need. But if we give it to others, and that's why the Attorney General's opinion makes sense, because if we collect their immigration status, then it could be used by immigration enforcement officials for then to then enforcement actions. And so that's what this is saying, is that's why that reference makes sense. It's for use by others. The language is right in there. So resources and data collected by the district shall not be used directly or indirectly by others.
It just says directly or by others, right?
But directly or by others, to compile a list or anything. It's the others is the issue, I think. That's how I read it.
And I think to go with what Trustee Newman was talking about, the piece that's not here is when you talk about, I think it's called SOPIPA or whatever that language was, that says that as a district, we don't share out data with vendors, et cetera, and that piece goes hand in hand with a whole lot of what Mr. Russ's work is when you talk about computers and third-party vendors and that we're not releasing that data out and we're controlling it in-house. And so it's more than just one thing. I think Becerra's point on immigration is valid, but there's more to this than that, if I understand the law correctly. Because there's more to this than just others is key. But others is key not just for the decision that he's talking about, but it's key to other laws within California that says student privacy is an important thing to observe. Trustee Irvin.
Okay, I think that sort of clears it up, what Amy was saying, Trustee. Yeah, because I had the same question about the collection of data and not being able to let's talk about sharing it, but we share a lot of data. So did that impact that data that we share, or are they incongruency, or are they conflict, or they don't even have? They're not. Are we calling apples and oranges?
The state is not going to give up on their delayed data collection. They're not going to allow us to do something that doesn't let them to collect that stuff in CalPads.
Okay. Well, that cleared up. Trustee Newman cleared it up when she said the others. That makes sense.
I would also like to point out that Government Code 8310.3 prohibits districts from disclosing information about immigration status or religion to federal government authorities for use in the compilation of a registry for immigration enforcement or otherwise assisting in the creation of such a registry.
So, could we just add that, what you just said, into that paragraph?
That can easily be added.
That clarifies it so well. It just says, this is why this statement is in here, this is what it relates to. My only concern is that it's just a little general, directly or to others. To me, didn't say who and why it's in there. But if you read that, your response about the immigration enforcement, I think it really helps. Is the board amiable for that?
Trustee Lopez?
I was just going to say that, yes, at this given point, Becerra's focus is on immigration, but this kind of like I said, like I always talk about, we have to think when the day when the time is different, right? And this definitely can be later adjusted to what if there's, I mean, a sort of things that we have to protect, or we have to protect individuals based on these factors. So I would like to keep it as is.
I agree. I think if you add the sentence, it now limits it and it changes the frame to now say it only applies to what you just listed.
Okay.
And if we don't list everything, we just unlisted things. Trustee Brown.
Okay.
I was just going to say the same thing in different words. If we're talking about non-discrimination, it's applying to every protected class and every group equally.
Right.
It applies to everything. If we start bullet pointing this, we change the frame.
Okay.
Even saying protected class.
Yep.
Yeah, that's true.
I think it allows for a wider interpretation the way it is, and I think that's the intent. Okay. Other questions? Comments?
I don't know, you haven't quite convinced me completely, but I'm close.
Okay.
Anyway.
Were there any other changes you wanted to make in this?
So vague to me.
It's
just
meant to be
seems so
vague.
general to me. And so, anyway. All right.
I think this is one of these board policies where we have to acknowledge where the law plays versus where discretion plays. Right?
Read it perfect.
Yes, but if you add it, you just limited the scope of the board policy. Now you've said that this only applies to this particular situation, this particular place, by putting the list on there, and you've limited the scope. I don't think that's the intent, and I think that if we're going to start writing legal code, then that's a bad idea. I think it gets us in more trouble down the road than it buys us. I would rather leave it open for interpretation. Trustee Newman, you're the...
I just want to say on this last line in the policy, which said district programs and activities shall be free of any racially derogatory or discriminatory school or athletic team names, mascots, or nicknames. I just have to say with there was some foresight of some people that picked the mascots, because I went through all the schools when I read that and clicked through in my head and thinking, well, that's good. We don't have any that we need to remove or anything like that. And so just being cognizant of that as we evolve. But I think that we began at a decent place, so a good place. So kudos to our predecessors.
Seeing no other lights, questions out to the public for comment? Seeing none, back to the board for comment. Seeing none, looking for a motion to approve the first reading of BP 0410. I see a hand over here, Trustee Irvin. I see a second, Trustee Lopez. All those in favor say aye. Aye, passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Boucher, for your time tonight.
Good meeting all.
I'm going to abstain on that one.
Okay, it's 6-1. My
not
fault.
vote, so
I
I'm
apologize.
abstaining
So 6-0-1.
I don't normally do that, but I'm doing it tonight.
That brings us to B7B, which we moved off of consent because Trustee Newman has a very good eye. This one goes to, I'm assuming, Mr. Rich, because he's creeping up close. Mike is yours, sir.
Thank you. Are we talking about is this B7A or B?
It's now B. It used to be a D.
We're addressing the ARs or the BPs? Because we had the BPs at 7A, right? Is that correct?
Let me turn this over to Trustee Newman.
AR first?
I think the AR first makes the most sense, and
Perfect.
then we probably won't have any changes to the BP.
Perfect.
Okay.
So board policies and ARs 6142.1, .11, and .111 give guidelines for stakeholders for physical education and activity materials. Tonight, it's the first read of the proposed changes. And really, this is to bring the current policies in line with the CSBA recommended language. So included in these changes are the need to change the number from 6142.1 to 6142.7 to be in alignment with the CSBA recommendations. The elimination of 6142.111, as this is information is now included in the .7 board policy to match the recommendations, and the renumbering of 6142.11 to 6142.71 to again bring that into alignment with the current code. So I recognize that's a lot of numbers there, but that was the intent. So I'm free to take any questions you may have.
I'm going to turn this over to Trustee Newman because this was her request and she caught some really good things here, and I think she's the one that should drive that conversation.
All right, if you pull up D8, it has AR 614211, right? Or 61.
Correct. Currently, it's called AR 6142.11, and we're recommending it be changed to 0.71. But yes.
0.71.
So
Okay.
in regards to the physical education dress requirements, that's what you're referring
Right.
to.
So when I read that, I know that some issues have come up with regard to our students that are required by their religious beliefs to wear certain clothes or wear certain head pieces. And so I think I am suggesting that we add, let's see. So to AR 614271, I guess I had that down as 11. Okay, make sure I write that down right. I'm suggesting that we add to that one the following language, and it can be a number 6 on this in the AR. And it should read, the district's physical education dress code shall accommodate a student's religion in accordance with the district's non-discrimination policies. And so basically we just kind of, if we could loop, well, I guess in the AR we don't need to put in the legal sites, but that way we just put that language in there so that it would accommodate the non-discrimination policy. So our students, we have our Sikh students that have certain headpieces, and our Muslim students have certain dress code requirements. Those are the two I could think of. There might be others as well, as our student population becomes more diverse. So that would accommodate our students. Anybody have any problem with that? I think I'd add it as a 6.
Would you want it as a 6, or you want it as G under item 3?
Recommended dress.
6.
6?
I think 6, because then it won't be
Looped in.
Yeah, because it may not be dress, may be too limited because it's you know, we're tugging it on their head, and if people interpret it that be from the neck down, then that way it won't limit it to that. It's
perfect.
It's any part of the student head to toe would cover it then on 6. All right, so that was my suggestion on 71, and then I had another suggestion on if we turn to AR 61 42.7. And this is a student that is very good friends with my son last year. They had their IB testing during Ramadan, and that's governed by, you know, the rules of the IB program. And so she was talking to the administrator of the IB program and talking to her imam at her temple or the mosque, and just trying to figure out what she could do, because it meant she was fasting during this really rigorous testing. And so just thinking about what is required of our students when they are fasting. There's a number of religions that do practice fasting, and so to accommodate our students that are doing that, particularly with regard to physical education, we can't move testing that we don't control. So the AP and the IB testing, we can't really control when those tests, you know, that is dictated to us from outside agency. But we can control on the PE. So in terms of what they would be required to do when they're fasting, I would suggest adding language, and I think I put it in
Modified or reduced.
Yeah, modified or reduced, but I have some language where I would put it. Let me see. Where is it and what page? So the language I suggest adding, and I'll figure out where I decided to put it. I have things written down everywhere. Students participating in verified religious fasting shall be allowed modified or reduced physical education activities during the student's fasting period, during the time that they're fasting. And I put in verified, and I'd like to hear your point on what the rest of the board thinks on that. I thought maybe that it would be like a parent notification or, you know, just something that the student would, verified wouldn't be a huge bar for the student to meet, but it would be something so that they can't say, well, every day I'm fasting.
No, I like
So-
I like your idea of the parent, because I think the assumption is our parents are, for the most part, if we're having this discussion at a school level, then we're probably in a very honest place.
Yeah.
You know, and by the same token, I think a parent phone call or email to a teacher would be plenty to move forward on that move. If it doesn't, then we've got a broken communication system. I think the lower the bar, the better.
And the other point on the fasting is I debated between shall and may. So students participating in verified religious fasting shall be allowed modified or reduced physical education activities. Shall means that they shall be provided that. And may would leave it up to the discretion of the PE teacher.
Shall.
I think shall is probably better, but
Let's take out the fuzzy language. I like
I
shall.
wanted to, I'd written it down May first, and then I debated it and put down shall. And I'm letting see, where should it go?
While you're doing that, can I turn to Trustee Irvin on a light while you work in
Yeah.
next week? Trustee Irvin.
Well, I was just going to go back to Trustee Newman when she was trying to recall the different headdresses from different cultures. And I know you mentioned a couple of them, but I think we probably need to do a little more research to find out, make sure we cover everyone we have in the...
Well, I'm not dictating. We're not identifying them. It's just I'm giving them as examples as we talk about it, but we're not identifying them in the policy because I expect our student body population to continue to become more diverse, and you know I couldn't anticipate what those would be at this time. I don't think we should list them.
I agree.
I wouldn't want to limit it.
I think bullet pointing gets us in more trouble than
I
it's
was
worth.
just doing it to just explain it.
Right.
Why we might need it.
Right. Okay. I was just making sure it wasn't limited
Yeah.
to those. So I was going to the broad, make
Yeah.
it open. So
It's going to be open, because I think
Yeah.
if there's anything we're sort of getting in line about, it's where we bullet point, we need to be very cautious.
Yeah. We just need to figure out where this goes. I think it goes under monitoring moderate to vigorous physical activity, probably. Is it number 3?
Yeah, I
there
just
at
wanted to
end
flip
of
the page, so it goes to 2, so we add a 3 and add your language as a bullet number 3.
So we'd add the language on this one would be students participating in verified religious fasting shall be allowed modified or reduced physical education activities during the student's fasting period. And then that would go under number 3. So
On 6142.7A at the
yeah.
bottom of page number 3.
What do you think of that? It seems like that may
Good
fit
placement.
right there.
And it would keep it towards the front, not buried in the back.
And yeah, because I think number 3 at the top. The first part is the instructional time of how much each student has. It maybe I think probably right there. This is as good a place as any. You guys see another spot for it.
It's good.
Those were my 2 changes. And then I wouldn't have any changes to the board policy. Let's see.
I agree.
I will just make one short comment. I just have a comment that I know in the past we have made accommodations for students for graduation on Sabbath because on Friday night they needed to graduate before the sunset, and so that was an accommodation that we made. We moved a couple of graduations up to meet that time frame. So that actually was, we weren't aware until some student came to the district and said, I have concerns about this. So just being able to make accommodations for some of the religions in our district, I think is helpful.
Okay. Does that get us in a good place? So, no more board comment. Out to the public for comment or questions. None. Coming back to the board. So we essentially have two items. One's ARs, the other one's just simply the BPs that go hand in hand with these, correct?
Well,
So what we just did now were the ARs.
just the ARs, we'll vote on that separate.
Okay, so looking for a motion to accept AR 6142.1, 614, I gotta read these numbers, .7, physical education activities. Motion to approve. Trustee Lopez, looking for a second. Trustee Irvin, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Unanimous, passes, so now we're on to the BPs. I'll put it back to you, but I think we're gonna move rapidly here since we don't have changes to the BPs, correct?
Yeah.
It's just the BPs that go with the ARs we just did? Seeing no lights up here, out to the public for comment? Seeing none, back to the board for comment? Seeing none. Looking for a motion to pass the BP 6142.1, 6142.11, 6142.111. Looking for a motion. Trustee West, looking for a second. Trustee Lopez, all those in favor say aye. Aye, passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Rich. Okay. I believe that gets us to the end of the road. I believe we're now down to asking board members if they have a future item to put on a board agenda. Seeing no lights, looking for a motion to adjourn. Come on, that's gotta be there. All right, looking for a second. Trustee Brown, meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.